Hello everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Thriving in Mental Health and Wellbeing conference, proudly hosted by AFAC. For those of you who've never met me, only online maybe, my name's Michael Baldy, as in no hair, it's like Aldi with the B in front of it, like that shop. So I work, I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources from Fire and Rescue New South Wales, so it's a privilege to come to WA and enjoy your nice winter weather, which has been fantastic. I've been here for a few times in summer and it's been beautiful, and yesterday was the coldest and rainiest day in 38 years, so yeah, it's nice to see WA in winter. But yeah, anyway, I actually chair the Mental Health and Wellbeing group for AFAC, so hence my capacity here today to facilitate this fine forum, which we're all attending at. So on behalf of AFAC, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're here holding today's event on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, a proud people from southwest Western Australia. AFAC acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet, and from the various lands from which people are joining us online today. This acknowledgement also extends to our friends across the ditch in New Zealand and the First Nations people from New Zealand. We pay our respects to elders past and present and celebrate the diversity of First Nations people across both of our fine and proud countries. Before we begin today, I'd just like to talk about a little bit of housekeeping. So if there is an emergency, we're in good hands with Fire and Emergency Services WA right here at the table. But if we just exit out the door there and take the stairs down to the front of the building, and Fire and Emergency Services WA will then look after us from there. So toilets are also out there on the mezzanine level to the left, just behind the lift well. And that's just the general housekeeping. We'll also be recording today's event, so there are a number of participants attending online, and that's currently being recorded. And the recording will be made available to all participants post-event. Today, in terms of questions, AFAC have kindly organised an app called Slido, S-L-I-D-O, and that'll be available through accessing a QR code on your phone. Through that code, you'll be able to pose any questions that you would like us to raise at the conclusion of the various presentations. So please have a look at the QR code on the screen or in your information packs, and you'll be able to log on to that Slido app. The Slido app also allows you to upvote questions. So that really means that if there's a particular question somebody's raised and you'd really like to hear that asked during the course of the proceedings, you choose to upvote that so it gets raised in popularity, and then it will be asked as part of this forum. We won't actually be taking questions from the floor. It's just too difficult to manage that plus online. So the best thing to do is just to raise all the questions through the online Slido process. If you want to use the chat function online as well, please feel free to do so. If you would like everybody to see what that chat question is or comment is about, then please include in brackets everybody on that chat function. You'll be able to see that there, just to select everybody, so that everyone attending today's function will be able to view the comments and issues. AFAC's also committed, as we all are in our organisations, to providing a respectful and safe environment. So we shouldn't have to remind everybody, but in this day and age, sometimes online people can say something that might be taken out of context. Please just remain respectful and professional in all the correspondence, communication, comments and questions that we utilise through any contributions to Slido. Some of the topics we'll be discussing today deal with mental health and trauma. They can be quite confronting, so if you do feel a bit impacted or affected by that, take some time out just to prioritise how you're feeling and make sure you're looking after your personal well-being. Our AFAC Mental Health and Wellbeing group is supported by an AFAC Council sponsor, and that's Mr. Chris Hardman. Chris is the Chief Officer of Forest Fire Management Victoria. Chris isn't here in person today with us, but he has sent along a video message which we'd just like to share with you all now. So, thank you.
Hello everyone. The topics covered here today are important to us all. Maintaining good mental health is crucial for everyone. It affects our overall well-being, our relationships, our ability to cope with the challenges, and helps build a fulfilling and a balanced life. The mental health of emergency services personnel in Australia is particularly critical given the compounding effects of exposure of potentially traumatic events, high pressure situations, and the added strain of recent compounding events, including natural disasters, COVID, public health emergencies, and other crises. Interestingly, more than 1 in 2.5 employees and 1 in 3 volunteers in emergency services organisations have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, compared to 1 in 5 of all adults in Australia, and that is according to the Answering the Call report. Creating a mentally healthy community is something we all must work towards. A workplace culture that promotes positive well-being will only succeed if we work together at every level to achieve this. For all of us, mental safety must be considered and prioritised in the same way we treat physical safety. I encourage you to participate in today's events and to ask questions and to share your thoughts and experiences through Slido. Thank you all.
So today, I guess the topic series that's sponsored today by Stewart and Heaton is really the AFAC Leading Practice in Mental Health Awards. So Stewart and Heaton have partnered with AFAC for this Leading Practice Mental Health Award since 2016, so it's been quite a long-standing relationship now. It's provided an opportunity for the sector to gather together to share information and learnings about the various mental health and wellbeing programs that go on in this space. So I'm very proud to have Simon Stewart here, who's the Managing Director of Stewart and Heaton Clothing. I'd like to invite Simon up to just come and say a few words to us. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning and welcome to the West, for those online as well. As Michael alluded to, we've got some very unseasonal Perth weather at the moment, so I hope you're all tucked up nice and warm wherever you are. Welcome on behalf of Stewart and Heaton. We're delighted to be involved in the masterclass again today. As Michael mentioned, the relationship goes back some 6 years now. As you're aware, a lot of you are addressed by Stewart and Heaton in the room tonight and today, and also around the nation. Our core business is in the manufacture of PPC and uniforms across the emergency services sector, and it's a very important part of our business, a very core part of what we do. Some years back, we were approaching a milestone anniversary date for our business, and we contemplated how we might celebrate that milestone, and thoughts went to a party or some sort of event, and then as a management team we decided that rather than a moment of fun and frivolity, that we'd redirect those funds to a more lasting project and legacy where we would engage with a core part of our business. And we set about some discussions with a number of agencies, and in the end spoke to AFAC and Stuart Ellis, and the Stewart and Heaton Leading Practice in Mental Health Award was born. And I think the first award was at the Adelaide AFAC conference in 17 or 18, I think it was. The only condition we put on the involvement with the award was that the learnings of the winning project should be shared across all emergency services, not only just in the fire and emergency services sector, but also police and other agencies as well. So I'm delighted that that has been the case and still is the case as well. So today's focus is obviously on the thriving in the emergency services sector, the smart work design project that DFES were successful in winning, or the project was successful in winning the award last year. I'm sure a lot of us are looking forward to understanding the learnings there and leveraging off those learnings as well. So we're delighted to be involved in the project. We're delighted to be here today, and we hope you all enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for that, and thank you to Stewart and Heaton for your ongoing support and commitment to mental health and wellbeing, which we all recognise is extremely important, particularly in our emergency services sector. I'd now like to welcome Acting Commissioner of Department of Fire and Emergency Services Western Australia, Mr. Craig Waters, to also come up and address and say a few words. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Michael, and I'm told I'm not to step backwards at all on this tiny little stage, so we'll see how we go. I'm sure there's people in the room that can help me if I do. Firstly, can I acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And although not here, can I also acknowledge AFAC Council sponsor Chris Hardman for his fantastic work in advocating for this initiative. Simon Stewart from Stewart and Heaton, thank you for not only sponsoring the event, Simon, but also for being here today as well, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome to everyone to today's AFAC Masterclass, especially for those that have travelled across from the eastern states to be here today and those joining online. I do apologise for the weather that we put on, but we did try to make you feel at home, especially the people from Victoria, because it's always freezing when I go to there, so we just try to fit in as best we could. Can I also like to take this opportunity to thank both AFAC and Stewart and Heaton for awarding DFES the Leading Practice in Mental Health Award, which has brought us all here today, and a lot of kudos goes to the people on my left here at the table around our wellness team, so a very big warm appreciation hand to the DFES team that actually enabled us to win the award. So fantastic achievement, and we're really chuffed at receiving it. As we all know, AFAC plays a crucial role in supporting our entire emergency services community, driving national consistency through collaboration, innovation and the partnerships that we all enjoy through all the jurisdictions around Australia and New Zealand. The holistic approach allows us to collectively tackle challenges, explore solutions, but also, and more importantly, inspire new opportunities and approaches moving forward. And this is vitally important in the mental health and wellbeing space. Recent research from Beyond Blue has identified that in Australia around 45% of all people will experience mental health condition during their lifetime, and that's absolutely a staggering statistic to even consider. The same research also notes that because of the increased occupational risk of exposure to traumatic events and mental and physical health stresses, that people in the emergency services sector, our own people, our staff and volunteers, are more than twice as likely to be affected, either very highly or highly rates of psychological distress. So again, they're people, our own people working in our sector, that are going to be exposed to this type of event. Unfortunately, many do not receive the support and assistance that they require, and as a result, too many people experience preventable physical and psychological distress. They also experience disruptions in both their education and also their employment. They experience relationship breakdowns, stigma, and a loss of life satisfaction, and also a loss of opportunities into the future. Action and investment in activities that promote mental health and wellness can help to improve positive outcomes and reduce the impact not only on individuals but also on teams, organisations and the broader community. Everyone, and I'll re-emphasise this, everyone has a responsibility to build and maintain a mentally healthy workplace culture, one that is inclusive, rejects stigma and discrimination, actively supports recovery and, importantly, enables personal growth. When an organisation has a mentally healthy workplace culture, our well-being, our sense of purpose, job satisfaction, our organisational commitment are more than likely to exceed. A workplace culture that values mental health and well-being is basically just a good place for everyone to work and be involved in. It's important to acknowledge that meaningful work and volunteering are also protective mechanisms and contribute to the overall well-being, providing a livelihood to people. They also provide a sense of confidence, achievement and purpose, structured routines for them to follow, and an opportunity for positive relationships to be built across the sector. That's why in 2021, DFES committed to Thriving at DFES, the agency's inaugural mental health and wellbeing strategy, and also the action plan to make sure that we delivered. Thriving at DFES took a unique approach to mental health and wellbeing, focusing not only preventing mental health issues and providing support, but making sure that we also promoted thriving in our environment. Harnessing an approach that is multifaceted, integrated and holistic will produce the greatest benefits for our individual workforce, but also the organisation as a whole. This is particularly important with a large organisation with a diverse workforce, where a one-size-fits-all approach or mentality will never work. Creating a workplace for everyone, where everyone thrives, requires deliberate actions and also, again, a shared responsibility between all those involved. Mental health and wellbeing at work is a collaborative effort between individuals, between teams, and also involves the organisation. It means we must work together on several levels, and whilst support is needed at all levels, it's important that senior leaders of the organisation are promoting the initiatives. Thriving at DFES has been actively supported by our senior leadership cohort, and in fact I'm one of 3 Thriving at DFES ambassadors that regularly supports the program and encourages our corporate involvement throughout all the initiatives that we do. Since launching Thriving at DFES, we've enhanced several key mental health and wellbeing activities, ensuring they're not only fit for purpose, but they're also supporting the people that we want to help. These include psychological support service and key health promotion events such as Movember and Are You OK, which has seen strengthening through interagency collaboration and also, again, a shared responsibility approach. We've also introduced several new initiatives such as the Black Dog Institute training, Mind Dharma, the annual Wellbeing Challenge, and several pilot programs that are currently going through the evaluation phases. Most recently, these pilot programs include mood, food, nutrition for mental health, and also cancer aid. To complement the programs and activities, we've also implemented a range of strategic engagement strategies to ensure that we're not only ensuring two-way communication, but also providing opportunities to get feedback from those frontline people. This approach ensures that we're accountable to emergency services staff and volunteers, and we can adjust our approach based on the workforce's needs and also the changing challenges that are presented going forward. We're extremely proud of where we've come in the last 2.5 years. Yes, we've got a little bit more work to do in promoting the Thriving at DFES more, but we have learnt so much, and I'm sure you're going to learn more of those learnings over the course of today. Thank you all for attending, and I wish you all the best for today's event. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Craig, and thanks for sharing those insights, and big thank you to the DFES team as well for your support in helping to organise this event. The thing that struck me, and we have this similar mirror in New South Wales as well, is for many years we've talked about mental health and wellbeing as a significant issue, but to actually see commitment from senior leadership and investment in the resourcing and support of the programs, putting your money where your mouth is really important, and that really resonates with the staff, so well done. And really look forward to hearing the upcoming presentation from our presenters. So, without further ado, it gives me a great privilege to introduce our first presentation today, which is Thriving in Emergency Services within Department of Fire and Emergency Services WA, and we have Charlotte Hunter and Mitchell Sewell from DFES to give us the presentation. Just a bit of bio background. So Charlotte is the co-manager of the Mental Health and Wellbeing branch at DFES. Charlotte's a registered psychologist with a Masters in Industrial and Organisational Psychology. And Charlotte has worked in mental health and wellbeing space at DFES for nearly 10 years. In her current position, Charlotte supports the Mental Health and Wellbeing branch, who are a multidisciplinary team currently implementing the strategy and action plan to promote the Thriving in the Workplace program. Mitchell is the co-manager of the Mental Health and Wellbeing branch at DFES as well. He's an accredited exercise psychologist, physiologist, and a sports scientist with a grad certificate in business as well. Prior to commencing employment with DFES, Mitch worked clinically providing exercise prescription services for chronic acute injuries and disease management. In his current position, Mitch supports the Mental Health and Wellbeing branch, who are again the multidisciplinary team currently implementing the strategy about thriving in the workplace. So I'd like to invite Charlotte and Mitch forward to share with us their insights and learnings and next steps for the Thrive program. So.
Okay, I'm quite a bit shorter, so I don't know, do I need to move the microphones at all? No, they're all good? Fantastic. Hello and welcome everyone to the Thriving in the Emergency Services Masterclass. It's so wonderful to have you here, some very friendly faces in the room, as well as everyone who's joining us online. As Mike said, I'm Charlotte Hunter and I'm currently the co-manager of the Mental Health and Wellbeing team at DFES, and our primary responsibility is the delivery as well as the development of Thriving at DFES. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, and I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Today we're going to take you through the design and the development of Thriving at DFES, which is the department's first mental health and wellbeing strategy and action plan. This will include a deep dive into our consultation and engagement process, so what did we actually do in that space, how we brought it all together, as well as the quality check we undertook. We will then take a look at the actual strategy, so what did we want to achieve, in essence, what was our vision, and also the action plan, so how were we actually aiming to achieve that vision. This will be followed by an overview of the implementation strategy, as well as evaluation, as it's really vital that we can measure the impact of not only the programs we've implemented, but also the strategy as a whole to help us inform the next iteration. We will then go through what worked, as it is important to celebrate our successes along the way, but it is equally important to learn from what we did through this journey. So we will summarise the lessons learned so that we can improve for the next version. We'll finish our session by looking at the revision and renewal process, and of course, those ongoing challenges that I'm sure many of the organisations here also face. So as you can see, there's not much to cover in the next hour or so, but for those of you who know me, I like to talk and I can talk very fast, so I'm sure we'll get it done in time. You will all be aware that there is a lot of information out there concerning mental health and wellbeing, especially what that looks like in the emergency services. So, whilst in the design and development phase of our strategy and action plan, we spent a lot of time familiarising ourselves with key documents, research findings and recommendations, the myriad of different frameworks out there, as well as key legislation, to ensure that we had a solid basis to develop our strategy and action plan. This included, but by no means is limited to, of course, the extensive work undertaken by Beyond Blue into the mental health of our first responders. Also, the Thrive at Work framework, which I'll delve into in the next slide. Recommendations from both internal as well as external audits and program reviews, and the strategies and action plans from other agencies. Those are other foreign emergency service agencies from both nationally and internationally, but also other government agencies and the private sector. Once we had a comprehensive understanding of what the contemporary research and frameworks were recommending, it was really important that we engaged our own people to find out what it is that the people on the ground, our employees and volunteers, wanted, what they needed, and in essence, what they were recommending. We wanted this strategy and action plan to resonate with our people and make a real impact for them. And so a significant part of the development was engaging our people. Essentially, our aim was to create a strategy and action plan for the people, by the people. And I'll deep dive into what our consultation engagement process actually involved in a couple of slides' time. So one of the key drivers for change was the Thrive at Work initiative, and this was developed by our Future of Work Institute here at Western Australia's Curtin University. This initiative is underpinned by a world-leading evidence-based framework that helps all organisations, like DFES, to navigate the wealth of information of mental health in the workplace. This framework has been developed in consultation with industry and an extensive evaluation of the academic literature. The result is a comprehensive framework that provides organisations with a set of evidence-based strategies to address the full spectrum of mental health. Essentially, this framework provided us with a blueprint on which we could develop our own strategy and action plan, ensuring we take a holistic approach that not only focuses on helping our people get well again if they are injured mentally, this is known as the provide support pillar, but also on helping people stay well, that's the prevent harm pillar, and be the best they can be, so promoting thriving. Within each of these 3 key pillars, there are 9 building blocks that outline evidence-based strategies to help us achieve each of those building blocks. When drilling down into each of the building blocks, we were able to comprehensively map what we were currently doing in the mental health and wellbeing space, uncover any gaps we had in service delivery, and start to integrate new activities to strengthen our approach moving forward. You will hear more about this framework, in particular the Smart Work Design strategy, in this afternoon's session with Karina Juritsma. As already said, we wanted Thriving at DFES to be a strategy and action plan by the people. Only by involving our people every step of the way will we get the buy-in, the support, and ensure it is fit for purpose. To achieve this, we undertook an extensive consultation and engagement process using multiple methods to ensure everyone had an opportunity to engage in a way that made them feel both comfortable but also heard. This included running a series of workshops, focus groups, and also undertaking a number of key stakeholder interviews and meetings. Some of the most notable meetings and interviews we undertook were those with the United Professional Firefighters Union, as well as those with each of the different service volunteer associations, and also subject matter experts within the department. We also undertook a DFES-wide survey. Key questions we explored in each of these consultation methods was, what was DFES currently offering in the mental health and wellbeing space that our people wanted us to continue? So those were activities that our people on the ground felt provided value, benefited them, they saw they wanted us to continue those. We also asked them, what was DFES currently offering in the mental health and wellbeing space that they thought brought them benefit, but they needed improvements, they needed enhancements. Maybe the activities just weren't delivering the benefits or the value that the people on the ground wanted. And finally, what was DFES offering in the mental health and wellbeing space, currently offering in the mental health and wellbeing space that they wanted us to. So things that we weren't currently offering, that weren't on our radar, that we thought, maybe we should try, maybe we should look at that because it was a service delivery gap. As part of the consultation and engagement process, we also established two key groups. They were our reference group and our expert advisory group. Both of these groups were established during the design and development phase and will continue to run for the entire length of the strategy and action plan. The reference group comprises representatives from all of the different services that DFES represents, from all areas of the state, both metropolitan and regional, all levels of the organisation, union and volunteer association representatives, and key DFES delivery areas, such as the wellness team, the workers' comp and injury management team, the health and safety services team, and of course the team responsible for delivering this program, the mental health and wellbeing team. The expert advisory group comprises both DFES key personnel, so our team as well as key delivery areas, and our 3 executive sponsors, as well as external experts, and that includes 2 clinical psychologists, an occupational physician, and the Associate Professor from FOWI, Karina Juritsma, who you will hear from later on this afternoon. The collective primary goal of these 2 groups is to provide key insights and feedback, not only in the development and design stage, but also as we go through the journey of implementing Thriving at DFES, to act as our sounding board, to allow for information sharing so that there is that two-way street. Advocating and being a point of reference when necessary to promote the strategy and action plan, and probably most importantly, ensuring that practices, services and the activities are evidence-based, fit for purpose and adhere to required standards. These 2 groups will help us to remain both internally and externally accountable. As you can see, we worked really hard to gain representative feedback and input along the journey and as we continue through this journey. We also worked very hard to provide regular updates to our people. I think something a lot of organisations are guilty of is engaging their people, but then not updating them on how they have used their input, how they've used their feedback. If we are expecting our people to give up their valuable time, I think it is vital that we make the time to provide them with an update of how we have used that feedback or input. And this is a key change management process. We did this in a number of ways. For example, developing outcome summaries following each of the workshops and the focus groups. These summaries were sent to each of the individuals who attended, as well as being uploaded onto the dedicated Thriving at DFES page so that everyone in the organisation could view them. We also individually addressed every piece of feedback that was given on the final draft of the strategy and action plan. Whilst very time consuming, both Linda, who I see is on the back table now, and I thought it was a very clear way that we demonstrated to our people that we are genuinely seeking their feedback and input, and that what they did put forward, we took into consideration. We also established Thriving at DFES executive sponsors. We have 3 of them. Deputy Commissioner Craig Waters, who provided this morning's opening address. Assistant Commissioner Metropolitan John Broomhall, who's on the back table, thank you very much, and is here today and will be a member on this afternoon's Q&A panel. And Chief Superintendent, Bushfire Centre of Excellence, John Tillman, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. These 3 executive sponsors are well-respected individuals at DFES who actively and genuinely champion mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. Not only do our executive sponsors provide us with ongoing support, they also sit on both the reference group and the expert advisory group, as well as being the face of and attending as many Thriving at DFES activities as possible. So that was our consultation and engagement process. Comprehensive, it took a long time, And for those of you who know me, I do like to talk, and by the end of it, I think Linda and I were both quite exhausted, but it was very well worth it. And we do feel that it gave people, like I said, that chance and opportunity to engage in a way that made them feel comfortable, but also safe, as at the end of the day, we are talking about mental health and wellbeing. So, we then needed to collate all of the information. So from all of the different research out there on mental health and wellbeing in the emergency services, all of the different audit findings, both internally and externally to DFES, all the different recommendations that have been brought forward, and the consultation and engagement process into one simple, holistic document that was easily accessible to our workforce. The strategy component would outline what we wanted to achieve, so our overall vision for thriving at DFES, and then the action plan, we needed it to clearly outline how we were going to achieve that vision. Totally simple, right? Well, this is where the Thrive at Work framework came into play. By using the Thrive at Work framework, we were able to systematically map our proposed activities across the 3 pillars, ensuring that we were taking a holistic approach to mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, and also ensuring that each of the activities we were putting forward were evidence-based. In addition to this, we also needed to make sure that we had activities that supported our people across their volunteer employee life cycle, and that there were a combination of quick wins to show our people that we were committed to making progress in this space, as well as some big ticket items that would have real impact for them. Once we drafted this strategy and action plan, it underwent a rigorous quality check to ensure it was fit for purpose. Feedback was sought from each member on our reference group, from the expert advisory group, as well as our corporate executive. And as already said, each piece of feedback was individually addressed. Again, demonstrating to our people that our consultation and engagement was genuine and we were listening to them. So all of this leads us to Thriving at DFES, our department's first mental health and wellbeing strategy and action plan. Our vision is a mentally healthy workplace where everyone feels safe, supported, valued, included, and no one is left behind. Our goal for everyone to thrive at DFES. We wanted everyone to be able to engage with this document on some level and something to really speak to everyone reading it. So we created these key messages which sat at the very front of the document to help set the tone for the document and what we were trying to achieve. They are that mental health and wellbeing is more than the absence of mental illness, that life is an emotional roller coaster. Mental illness does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone. Doesn't matter if you're a volunteer, if you're career, metropolitan, regional, which service you represent. That there is no room for stigma. Mental health is everyone's business. It is a shared responsibility. Self-care is vital for mental health and wellbeing. Social support and connectedness are essential. Importantly, that seeking help is definitely not a failure, and that help is always available. You are not alone, whether that help comes from internally, from our organisation, or externally. And finally, that together we need to build our practical skills and demonstrate inclusive and positive behaviours. To achieve this, we developed a comprehensive action plan that individually outlined a list of mental health and wellbeing activities. Some activities would remain just as they are. Some mental health and wellbeing activities needed improvement so that they could be strengthened and provide greater benefit. And some activities would be brand new to the organisation. All of the activities outlined in the action plan were informed by some combination of our legislative obligations, research and program review recommendations, consultation and engagement, an identified service delivery gap, and/or interjurisdictional first responder evidence. For each activity outlined in this plan, there was a clear owner So who was responsible for developing, delivering, implementing and evaluating that activity? What were the measures of success? What was the due date, which has been a fun one? And of course, which Thrive pillar did that activity touch on? The official launch of Thriving at DFES happened on the 1st of July 2021. The channels to communicate this launch were varied to ensure it reached as many of our employees and volunteers as possible. I'm sure your organisations are the same in that there is definitely no one-size-fits-all approach that can be undertaken when it comes to effective communication. So we undertook a lot of them, as you can see. Some of the key ones that we undertook was a message from our Commissioner formally announcing the launch of Thriving at DFES. We had dedicated pages and banners on our staff intranet as well as our volunteer hub. A general circular went out to all of our members, as did a DFES announcement. So that's an email directly to all DFES employees and volunteers who have signed up for email communications. We also were able to undertake a kind of quirky implementation strategy. We had all of the screensavers on DFES computers for the month of July changed to Thriving at DFES promotional assets, which you'll see in a couple of slides' time. We tried to take as many face-to-face communications as we could during the implementation phase, but unfortunately, as you would have seen, given the year, we were hampered by COVID lockdowns, not as much as you from the East Coast, so I probably can't complain in that space, but that did limit our ability to undertake face-to-face. We also sent out numerous emails to our cohorts, and promotional assets were sent to all metropolitan and regional offices for statewide distribution. I would like to take a moment now to show you the Commissioner's message that helped launch Thriving at DFES.
Work and volunteering inevitably shapes our mindsets and behaviours, which can either help or hinder our performance. When it comes to mental health and well-being, every action counts. Everyone has a responsibility to build and maintain a mentally healthy workplace culture, one that is proactive and inclusive, rejects stigma and discrimination, reduces harm and enables individuals to be better prepared to seek help and support others. It will come as no surprise that a workplace culture that values mental health and well-being is good for everyone. I am pleased to introduce the first DFES Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy and Action Plan 2021-2023. The focus of this strategy is to actively strengthen our workplace culture to ensure your well-being, sense of purpose, safety and job satisfaction is a priority and at the forefront of what we do and who we are. It is important for all of us that we stand together to strive for something greater than the status quo. I am determined that DFES will be a mentally healthy workplace where you and everyone feel safe, supported, valued, included, and no one is left behind. We are investing in an exciting array of proactive, innovative, engaging mental health and wellbeing activities. Collectively, these activities reflect our long-term commitment to provide support, build resilience, and help us all be at our best and be part of a great team. You thrive, we thrive is our mantra. This strategy and action plan is founded in best practice and informed by extensive consultation and engagement with our people and our key stakeholders. It provides a blueprint on how we can best prevent harm, provide support and promote thriving to ensure we are all mentally healthy at work. You can find more information and see how you can benefit on the DFES intranet and the Volunteer Hub. When we support each other and all work towards our personal best, we fulfil our promise to Western Australia, working together for a safer state.
So we were cognizant of the fact that many people see strategies as mere words on paper, and that really actions speak louder than words. So to show our people that we were truly committed to thriving at DFES and putting our money where our mouth is, the launch of Thriving at DFES was accompanied by the launch of several brand new activities to the department, as well as some really important enhancements to current mental health and wellbeing activities. For example, we rolled out a number of Black Dog Institute training opportunities, especially to support our managers on the ground. We launched Mind Dharma, an evidence-based e-learning program which protects our mental health, builds resilience and equips workers with essential skills. We promoted an annual Wellbeing challenge to help increase healthy behaviours and promote teamwork. And we also developed an Are You OK, Are They Triple OK event guide to support people in running local events over the month of September in aid of Are You OK? We also developed and launched a series of Our Stories. As we all know, seeing our own people supporting or being the face of something automatically makes it be felt much more deeply. So we established a small cohort of Thriving Ambassadors. These are individuals across the department who have been brave enough to tell us their stories. Their stories are lived experiences of mental health and wellbeing. They're personal journeys that bring to life everything that we are wanting to achieve through Thriving at DFES. We hope by creating these narratives, it will help to break down the stigma surrounding mental health and wellbeing, help to normalise it, and demonstrate that it doesn't matter who you are, we each have a story to tell and that there is help out there. Again, we have ensured that each of our Thriving Ambassadors are representative of our people. They each come from different services, from both metropolitan and regional areas, and represent different levels of the hierarchy. In regards to ongoing implementation of the different mental health and wellbeing activities that Thriving at DFES have committed to, they are being implemented over the lifespan of the strategy and action plan. To keep us accountable and to ensure our people are kept up to date with what we are doing, we provide 6 monthly progress updates. Formal documentation goes to our corporate executive, and fun and engaging videos on what we have achieved in the past 6 months is uploaded onto our Thriving at DFES page so that everyone across the department can view. So this brings us to the evaluation, the fun bit, maybe. The majority of our key activities do have inbuilt evaluation measures, which is really good because it's important that we know how each of the activities are performing to make sure that they're delivering the benefits that we want them to for our employees and volunteers. But we also need to make sure that we can evaluate the strategy as a whole. So we will be using the Thrive at Work survey platform to formally evaluate the strategy and action plan. This survey will be sent out later this year. It provides a holistic evaluation as it measures all aspects of the framework. It will provide comprehensive and holistic insight into the perceptions by our employees and volunteers of what mental health is like at the department. It's also allowed us to undertake some key customisations so that we can gain feedback on specific programs and activities. And it also provides a dashboard, so every individual who will respond to this survey will get automatic feedback on where their survey responses fit and how the strategy and action plan can better support their mental health and wellbeing, as well as giving us an overall dashboard for the organisation. So that really brings us to where we are now, and therefore is a good time for us to stop, take pause, and make time to reflect. With this in mind, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mitchell Sewell, who will take you through the remainder of today's masterclass. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlotte, for the wonderful introduction. You're always a tough act to follow. I'm going to give it my best. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. May I provide special recognition of the VIPs and dignitaries joining us today, including AFAT Council sponsor, Mr. Chris Hardman, Simon Stewart from Stewart and Heaton Clothing, Acting Fire and Emergency Services Commissioner Craig Waters, AFSM, DFES Director, Human Resources and Safety, Nancy Appleby, everyone in the room today, and everybody joining us online. I've got the fun job of sharing with you some experiences and lessons learnt throughout the Thriving at DFES Strategy and Action Plan. We thought the best thing that we could do was provide some updates and advice around the things that we found worked well and strengthened the delivery, and some of our findings and lessons learnt that we would have applied retrospectively as well. For those who are looking at maybe tackling or going on this journey, I know these are some of the items that we would have loved to have known in advance as well. So what worked well? Design and development. We had a strength focus because we adopted an evidence-based framework which included programs and key services that had already been rigorously tested and proven effective in most instances. Given a limited number of resources, it's really important we're developing and implementing activities which lead to positive outcomes for our participants. Evidence-based programs provide documented health benefits and increasing the probability that positive return on investments will occur, or perhaps more importantly, improvements in participants' mental health and wellbeing. Conversely, by applying an evidence-based approach, we can create challenges in the delayed adoption of emerging trends and practices. Managing your workforce's expectations and providing realistic feedback as to what is currently available or in development is important to ensure ongoing trust and confidence in the programs and services that you're delivering. It's also important to apply an integrated approach to mental health, which includes all aspects of the 3 Thrive at Work pillars that Charlotte discussed earlier. These are provide support, prevent harm, and promote thriving. Traditionally, organisations, and especially those within emergency services, are familiar with reactive services, and it can be a real challenge to identify activities which are proactive in nature and promote thriving. For instance, Are You OK Day and our mental health first aid training programs. Both have high engagement and participation rates. However, they relate mostly to the provide support pillar. These are conversations which are normally reactive and mostly occur after the fact. Programs of this nature can be ineffective if they aren't supported by a robust system and a framework which aims to address all of the Thrive at Work pillars holistically. This statement is not to demean programs such as Are You OK or Mental Health First Aid. But to get the little stuff right, you've got to get the big stuff right to begin with. Thriving at DFES was also designed to be a dynamic and an agile document, allowing for changes to be considered and included where appropriate throughout the life of the strategy and action plan. Mental health and wellbeing is a growing and emergent space, and mounting research is influencing current best practice, advice and recommendations. It was extremely important that Thriving at DFES didn't commit to the development or the delivery of key activities that are no longer considered contemporary or current best practice. Allowing the ability to adjust and change our approach throughout the life of Thriving at DFES has protected the strategy and action plan from becoming outdated or impractical. Throughout our consultation and engagement processes, maybe to my surprise, our consultative opportunities were often met with a lot of appetite. This really helped to establish a confidence that DFES had a strong interest in the topic of mental health, and this interest, in our experiences, was fortunately shared across many areas of the organisation. Given enough time and notice, most emergency services personnel were more than willing to give their time and energy to contribute in one way or another. Some examples of where engagement and consultation occurred successfully included, but weren't limited to. You've heard a little bit about our mental health and wellbeing reference group already. It was really important that our reference groups were representative of the workforces they support. For DFES, we have numerous services and associations who need to be represented to ensure Thriving at DFES remains contemporary, accessible, fit for purpose, but maybe most importantly provides the opportunity to give feedback and to be heard. We've also learnt that over the course of a 3-year strategy and action plan, the people and positions change. It's unrealistic to continue to rely on the same people and positions inevitably, regardless of how capable and how much expertise and insight some people might be able to provide you. A continued call to action to invite others with key skills, roles and or experiences who can contribute positively to mental health and wellbeing networks is important to revitalise and sustain these groups. Throughout the course of Thriving at DFES, we've held 9 reference group meetings to date. These meetings run for approximately 60 to 90 minutes, and Microsoft Teams and online attendance is often the preferred mode of participation. And we do this to try and enable staff and volunteer attendance alike. Easier said than done. I'll go through some lessons learned later on around some of the challenges in that space as well. These meetings are an important environment to promote open and honest two-way communication and have been successful through providing psychological safety as a top consideration. As Charlotte alluded to, there's still sensitivity and stigma around mental health, and providing an environment where people feel comfortable and able to share openly is really, really important, and I believe we've built on that over time with these environments and continue to see more and more openness and discussion. It's actually, again, really taken me by surprise how many people are willing to put their hands up and participate in these types of environments and these forums, and I'm sure it's because it means it has a lot of importance to the subject of mental health and wellbeing to everyone within our organisation. So what else worked well? Our committees. So we have 2 major committees, People and Culture and our Corporate Executive. These have proven to be hugely important avenues for organisational updates, and they hold Thriving at DFES accountable through not only providing visibility throughout the organisation, but increased awareness across the agency as well. Some of the key activities undertaken include 6 monthly reports to our People and Culture Committee and our Corporate Executive, excuse me, and a 6 monthly workforce update video. This has possibly been our #1 communication strategy. On one instance, we've had over 1,300 hits, most probably because it's a short and sharp video which celebrates and recognises the key achievements and activities of Thriving at DFES, but it does it in about 5 to 6 minutes. It visually articulates what those key achievements are and delivers it in a really quick, concise manner. We do that every 6 months, and that's been really successful in helping to share quickly with the workforce a snapshot of what programs and activities have been attached to Thriving. Our executive sponsor involvement and visibility at key activities and working group meetings has been unwavering. This has come up consistently already. Leadership's a really key theme, and I think we'd all agree essentially or hugely important to the success of a mental health and wellbeing strategy. We've been fortunate to receive support and advocacy from respected leaders, and this will sound too cliche, but who walk the walk and they don't just talk the talk. Major events and milestones were always physically supported by our executive sponsors or leadership, and this has been monumental in demonstrating to DFES staff and our emergency services volunteers the department's commitment to Thriving at DFES. This is particularly important as leaders control the flow of work, set our expectations, model behaviours, and help to remove the stigma of mental health in the workplace. We had to adopt a multi-mode approach to our promotional communications. Although we would have liked to rely solely on a single mode of communication for the purposes of engagement and promotion, as has already been mentioned, we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. This could be attributed to the diversity of our workforce and subsequent differing preferences for engagement and communication. We therefore catered to as many modes of communication as possible, including digital, face-to-face interactions, created numerous promotional assets and collateral materials, adopted tailored branding for Thriving at DFES, and customised as many activities wherever possible. Our stories proved to be one of the most effective engagement strategies for creating awareness and branding for Thriving at DFES. It personalises our staff and emergency services volunteers and assists to demonstrate the benefits of a healthy work-life balance. It also humanises our personnel and removes the strong emergency services identity, which has been helpful in encouraging an increased sense of connection and belonging. To ensure the success of our Stories program, it was highly important to identify trusted and respected individuals who are both leaders and supporters of others. A nomination process involving line managers' endorsement helped to ensure that those involved elicited the desired values and behaviours. In addition, it also provided an opportunity for increased reward and recognition of the performance and going above and beyond by those individuals. So we do try and involve the line managers and make sure they have the opportunity to provide that feedback around the nomination process as well. Ooh, okay, shouldn't have looked up for too long. Customisation of activities. It's important to acknowledge the role first responders and emergency service workers perform. And the stresses encountered in the line of work are unique to the role. As a result, off-the-shelf products and general population health information isn't always as applicable and doesn't resonate as well with our workforces. Fortunately, a number of providers have been able to customise and tailor their content to our emergency services personnel, including customised characters in our Mind Armour program, Black Dog Institute case studies specific to emergency services organisations, and specialised campaigns, as you've already seen, such as Are They Triple OK? Evaluation. Fortunately, for several of our key activities, we had built-in evaluation measures, as there are already evidence-based programs and services, so we'd not always been required to create these metrics. The challenge for us lies in finding a way to compare apples with apples and make sure all of those evaluation metrics feed back up into an overall assessment and help to demonstrate the achievement of our key objectives. And that continues to be an area where we strive to improve, as different activities, services and programs will obviously have different evaluation measures at the moment. The ability to utilise the Future of Work Institute Thrive at Work survey platform provides great benefits to the department due to the ability to also customise questions, which enables us to meet our own needs and our key objectives. Another attractive benefit is to be able to make comparisons of our current results and outcomes against other industry findings and normative data, and this is particularly useful for us in the earlier stages of the delivery of Thriving at DFES, as we don't currently possess our baseline measure. Having a dedicated team. We've been extremely fortunate to establish a multidisciplinary team whose main purpose is the delivery of Thriving at DFES. Due to the largely reactive nature of an emergency services organisation, the protection of a dedicated team to undertake this work is crucial to the success of Thriving at DFES. We simply wouldn't be able to devote the required amount of time and energy, resources, to develop, implement and maintain Thriving at DFES without an organisational structure that enables us to do so. So what did we learn? We learned a lot. Throughout the consultation and engagement phases, there was always a preference to develop new first responder content and to customise existing programs and services. Unfortunately, this wasn't always achievable. The physical and mental demands of emergency services, and specifically incident response, are unique and often challenging. Although first responders in most cases possess high levels of health, fitness and resiliency above and beyond the general population, instances still exist in which emergency services personnel and public servants alike aren't fully addressing their basic needs in the first instance. It's important to adopt a holistic approach to mental health and wellbeing, which addresses both the foundational physiological needs, and these include simple things like nutrition, hydration, rest, exercise, stress management strategies. But the challenge lies in concurrently providing thriving opportunities for those who are already achieving these foundational aspects of wellbeing. Creating our workforce openness and acceptance to all types of programs and sources of information is crucial to attaining successful engagement. Throughout implementation, we did encounter a few issues, all of which could somehow be attributed to COVID. I'm sure a lot of the challenges across industry in the last 2 or 3 years could be attributed to COVID, so that'll be the last time I'll mention it throughout this presentation, I promise. But unfortunately, this resulted in less face-to-face promotion and delivery of the launch activities relating to Thriving, and it also negated our ability to attach Thriving at DFES to some of our key highly visible and attended events such as our Western Australian Fire and Emergency Services Conference, for instance. In a perfect world, removing timeframes, resourcing considerations, nice, I know, right? We all have them. This would have allocated a greater amount of time to being able to create, explore and develop Thriving at DFES, and this would have increased our capability to support broader implementation activities. I think what we're realising in hindsight is by not having been able to put as much time, energy and face-to-face involvement in the launch activities has resulted in us having to constantly look for those opportunities throughout the life of the strategy and action plan. There are always communication and engagement challenges within organisations, and although Thriving at DFES is deeply embedded and across the organisation, those pockets still exist where it could have been more largely influenced or even encouraged to take more local ownership and promotion in the earlier stages as well. Smart work design. You'll hear about it a little bit later on, and I'm glad Karina's probably not in the room as of yet, because I won't do as eloquent a job as describing the smart work design framework. But we have started to tap into looking at work design, and it's a really important consideration of providing safe work to volunteers and emergency services personnel. In basic terms, smart work is how to optimise the design of work to encourage more meaningful, interesting and motivating work. Smart work design outlines 5 key themes for consideration. These are stimulating work, the mastery of work, agency within work, relational components of work, and the tolerable components of work. We recognise that limitations exist within emergency services as to how elements of work design can be incorporated, and therefore how far the risk of both physical and mental harm can be mitigated. For instance, there are minimal aspects of agency and tolerable demands that can be adjusted as part of emergency services incident response. For these reasons, DFES, in conjunction with the Future of Work Institute, has decided to adopt a focus on mastery and relational demands, as these are modifiable components of emergency services work design. Evaluation. To effectively evaluate Thriving at DFES, we need to understand the program's measurable changes over time and how these relate to our key objectives. This is proven particularly difficult when a baseline measure isn't established initially. DFES is currently engaging, as you have heard, with the Future of Work Institute to support our evaluation using their Thrive at Work survey platform. This will establish a baseline measure for future evaluation purposes, whilst also enabling useful comparison with others in industry where appropriate. An area of growth for DFES is to continue to improve our ability to demonstrate the benefits and return on investment from Thriving at DFES, and importantly, how these outcomes align with other key business objectives such as safety, risk mitigation, performance and productivity measures, for instance. Miscellaneous lessons learned. We've spoken about a shared ownership or responsibility of mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, and we as a team responsible for delivering Thriving have certainly felt and experienced that firsthand, which was one of the biggest and most unintended benefits, I think, of working in this area. We're exposed to a wealth of mental health information, content, strategies and providers. This continued exposure creates a welcomed and constant reminder of the importance of proactive wellbeing activities, and these are most effective when you're managing low-level symptoms. But they can also help to keep us in a state of optimal health and wellbeing, or even in that state of thriving. We are all positioned somewhere in the mental health continuum, and with professional and personal stresses, there will be times where we are shifting in the direction of declining mental health and wellbeing. It's important to remember that none of us are immune, and that we all need to have established self-care strategies and proven coping mechanisms, especially the supporters and caregivers to others, which seem to be more of the personality types attracted to Thriving at DFES activities and events. We consider ourselves really privileged to be in a space where we have first-hand exposure to all of that information. Admittedly, it also does remind us how hard it can be to adopt and implement these healthy lifestyle changes within your own life, given all of the challenges of family, balance outside of work, work priorities, etc. We're surrounded by this information every single day, live and breathe it, and are really fortunate to be able to adopt some of these healthy practices, but also recognise in doing so that we don't just fall onto and adopt all of these practices as well. Stakeholder management. So, I'm sure everybody here knows the importance of engaging and keeping your stakeholders informed and up to date on the current happenings. But the topic of mental health and wellbeing can still evoke fear and uncertainty in some instances. So union bodies, heads and services of associations need to be kept completely aware of the current happenings, especially when there is direct involvement of their members. Consequently, seeking early support and endorsement for any new undertakings will prevent potential delays in the design, development or delivery of key activities, especially in emergency services industry where we know the nature of large-scale incident response and large-scale events can be just around the corner and can change at any moment the resources, the support, the availability of key stakeholders as well. So I know that's resulted in unintentional delays throughout the life of the strategy and action plan, and understandably so. The organisation has a key responsibility to the safety of the community first and foremost. Revision and renewal. So the second half of this year will see the Thriving at DFES team undertake evaluation of the inaugural strategy and action plan and the revision and renewal of Thriving at DFES 2024 to 2027. Key questions and considerations will include: what do we need to maintain? Quite simply, what has currently been fit for purpose or what has been enhanced to the point where it no longer requires innovation or improvements. It'd be great to have all of our key activities in this space. What activities need enhancements? What are we doing that's adding value but possesses the potential for improvement and greater outcomes? What activities should be removed? What's changed? What's no longer contemporary? What's no longer current best practice? Or what is no longer achievable in some instances? And this is where the dynamic strategy and action plan has been really important, again, to make sure that we're not backed into a corner into the creation and delivery of these types of activities. And what new activities could or should we be exploring? What gaps still exist which need to be addressed? Do we have a suitable spread of activities across the three pillars of the Thrive at Work framework? Oops. Ongoing challenges, and there are a few. Making our programs contemporary and accessible. A large proportion of our key programs and services promotion occurs during normal business hours, that's Monday to Friday, and this creates barriers to attendance for both of our emergency services staff, often due to incident response, if on station, or competing priorities in the offices, and volunteers, as they're often performing their paid work positions during the normal work week. So what do we do to work around this? We try to support as much participation as possible by providing lunchtime attendance options, lunch and learn with live streaming, quick and smart sessions, taking recordings that are made available post-session, and promoting the hosting of local events using our local event guides. This is not to get out of having to organise those events ourselves, this is because we know those events are more successful when they're locally owned, locally driven and championed by someone who's trusted and respected. Unfortunately, we are still working in an environment where the greatest preference for information transfer still appears to be face-to-face. This isn't always possible, and we need to continue to work diligently to encourage an openness to other modes of information transfer, especially as we're a relatively small team supporting a broad emergency services network. Marketing. The past few years have seen a saturation in information and communication, which include an increasing amount of mental health and wellbeing promotional content. This content overload, in addition to the constant work attributed to maintaining a state of preparedness for emergency services, has resulted in periods of extremely high volumes and speed of work. This has presented challenges for the delivery of Thriving at DFES and generating a widespread understanding of our shift in focus from traditionally reactive to proactive services. Developing easy to understand program terminology and branding for a broad and diverse workforce with differing communication preferences, and creating obvious distinctions between the Thriving team, or the mental health and wellbeing team, and our health and safety, workers' compensation and wellness counterparts has been imperative to demonstrating the department's commitment to creating a mentally healthy workplace. Without this workforce awareness and understanding, we run the risk of Thriving at DFES becoming a background activity. As a multidisciplinary team with health experts, marketing and promotion is far from our area of expertise, so it's been critical to work through our business's key stakeholders to assist with creating this visibility, including teams not limited to media and corporate comms, digitals and socials, and ICT especially, If these stakeholders are available in your businesses, we'd strongly encourage you to create meaningful working relationships. Program continuity. It's difficult to prevent staff movements and in turn the transfer of knowledge and expertise throughout your organisation, or in some instances away from your organisation. To protect against this, establishing frameworks and embedding systems and reporting lines not only supports the delivery of thriving at DFES, but it has protected it from competing organisational priorities. Deeply embedding the strategy and action plan into reporting requirements and as a key deliverable of annualised work plans safeguards it from becoming a low priority item. My advice to others is your time and energy is best spent developing or fixing your organisational systems in the first instance, although this is not always simple. It's important to remember, don't try to fix your people, fix your organisational systems. Our change control process. With a limited number of resources, we needed to be strategic in the way in which we prioritise activities to be developed, enhanced or maintained. Change requests require consideration to understand the potential impacts of these decisions to the overall outcomes of thriving at DFES. As a result, we've implemented our change control process, which requires supporting evidence addressing the following criteria for any raised changes. These can be inclusions, removals or modifications to key activities. Which of the Thrive at Work pillars does the activity relate to? What is the current timeline for delivery? What are the measures of success? What consultation has occurred to date? Which key stakeholders have been engaged? And has budget or resourcing been allocated or identified? And these are only to name a few. Although we would like to design, implement and deliver everything that supports staff and emergency services volunteers, mental health and wellbeing, this isn't achievable. We therefore need to adopt a strategic approach to the identification and prioritisation of changes to key activities. The described change control process helps us to fully consider and respond to requests for additions, removals and modifications to existing activities, but importantly does so in a transparent and equitable manner. So where do we want to be? Thriving at DFES has been far from perfect, but it has achieved a lot of great outcomes and it is an important step in the right direction, something we continue to plan to build on, expand and grow. We'd like to see this move into a world where everyone is provided the opportunity to thrive, although that might be a little aspirational. We'd like to see a world where mental health and wellbeing is ingrained in everything we do, because we're having mental health experiences in relation to everything we do, undertake, everybody we engage with. So why not put it at the forefront of these types of conversations? I have this little reminder in the back of my head around the importance of health and safety and it becoming one of the very first considerations in terms of work design and everything we do. And I have this ideology in my head that over the next however many years, that the mental health and wellbeing of our people will become just as important consideration at the very beginning of every conversation that we have as well. And I added a last one on here as well, and I think it comes back to the fact that work design and having meaningful work is important to our overall wellbeing. We'd like to see a desired future state where everyone who retires, resigns or moves on from an organisation does so in a better state than when they entered. Thank you for your attendance at today's forum. It's an amazing opportunity to share with our audience a snapshot of the department's inaugural mental health and wellbeing strategy and action plan. I hope you've gained some valuable insight into developing or delivering a similar strategy or action plan for your department, business or organisation. I'd suggest for those who are yet to venture into this area, it's not a matter of if, but of when. So I hope this presentation has proven timely and beneficial. I'd also like to advocate for our upcoming speakers, Karina and Evan, both of whom are experienced in the emergency services industry and are a wealth of information and expertise. I've seen both present on a number of occasions and I know they're going to provide absolutely outstanding presentations. Can I thank you again for your attendance and participation at today's forum.
Thanks very much, Mitch. Thanks very much, Charlotte, for sharing your insights and your learnings. I'm sure you've all very much appreciated that. And can really see why, DFES won the Stewart and Heaton award for leading practice in the mental health and wellbeing space. So congratulations once again to you. We're going to take a little break for morning tea to stretch the legs. So if we could have everybody back here in the different time zones. If you're in New Zealand, 2:45 p.m. If you're in the eastern states, 12:45. If you're in South Australia or Northern Territory, 12:15. And for us here in Perth, reconvene at 10:45. Thank you very much. Okay, so we might move on to the Q&A session of today about the presentation we've just seen. Mitch, I had a bit of an opening question. I was going to just direct it to you, if that's all right. So sorry for putting you on the spot. You talked about accessibility and communicating the change across the whole organisation and the rollout of how that communication is undertaken. What I'd sort of like to understand, it's something we struggle with often, is the role of leaders in delivering that safety leadership to the troops, as opposed to the leaders just listening and hearing what's coming out of the mental health wellbeing team and attending forums and watching online videos, to shifting that to actually ask what is the active role that you expect from your leaders, the assistant commissioner, chief superintendent, that type of stuff, to help you deliver this within the organisation.
Really good question, thank you. And there's a few different levels, I guess, I would touch on there as well. With our senior executive leadership team, seeing that ownership, that need, that belief, that interest to tackle this issue and starting that from the top was absolutely critical in knowing that this was something that we were going to look at and investigate in the right manner, and demonstrating that in terms of also a bottom-up, top-down approach was hugely important, because we've spoken about that component of shared responsibility in this space, and I think it's probably one of the most important topics where that is absolutely true. Individually, we won't change the culture, or we won't promote psychological safety on our own. It's just inevitable and it's unachievable. So making sure that we had leadership involvement, visibility, awareness, that they're able to talk to key components of the programs and the services with a lot of insight and knowledge was really, really important. But I'd probably take a step down then to mid-level management as well, and perhaps what it meant in that space, because sometimes that area could be seen as the meat in the sandwich, essentially, getting a lot of information around providing support, protecting their people, providing safety, in, I guess, a time where it's becoming increasingly more important as well. So one of the goals of Thriving at DFES was to make sure that there were opportunities for those leaders and those champions and those supervisors of others as well, to feel that they had some increased tools, resources, information as well, to equip them and enable them and upskill them to be able to do this role even better. And I guess now moving into a space where we also have the changing health and safety regulations, where we're, I guess, moving into an area where ignorance or a lack of understanding or a lack of ability to provide psychological safety is no longer going to be considered an acceptable answer, excuse, or a response. It was really, really important to have our leaders and our influencers in a position where they were supported and feeling equipped to be able to do that well. And I'd add one last little thing in there to say that as an organisation, we're really proud that we're able to start to tackle this journey in 2021, which was a long way ahead of before any of the health and safety regulations had occurred or were implemented as well. So one of my favourite things about Thriving at DFES is that we saw a need and we wanted to be on this journey before there was a legislative requirement to do it as well, and I'm very, very proud, as is the team of that. So tried to answer, I guess, a few different levels of that question. See if any of my colleagues want to add anything else.
I think the only other thing I'd like to add is the constant communication with our leadership, so that they did feel informed. So if the questions came up, they were able to do that. They sit on the corporate executive as well as our reference group and expert advisory group. So they were constantly updated on what we were achieving. And I think as well, just getting them actively involved. So John, the other John, and Craig were all instrumental in being the face of the different programs, as well as actually attending the events. So they've all attended the Black Dog Institute training, they've all gone through Mind Armour, they come to Are You OK Day events. So I feel like I probably over-communicate with them, and John will probably agree with that, but I feel like that's our role, to support them. But because they are genuinely invested in it, we probably don't need to, because they're already part of it. And I think that's crucial. You need to have the genuine leadership for it to work.
So how does it look if I'm a regional or a zone commander based in Esperance and I hear about this great corporate initiative from DFES? How do I buy into it? And what's the expectation of me as a regional or zone commander to help roll that out?
Can you hear me? Yep. I think, look, we're a very diverse department. You know, we're spread right around the state, and we communicate very well electronically. And you know, the advent of Teams through COVID has helped us. But we were using it way before, you know, COVID. So it's very easy to seek help. I know these guys do a roadshow. They'll visit the regions, and there is the support there for people in regional areas. But the expectation is well communicated. People had many emails, many different ways that they could buy into it through the regional and our communication network. So I think if people wanted to know more, they can pick up the phone. They know where we are. They know it's very easy for them to link in. But I think that we're used to doing that in WA. We've got a huge state, you know, size of half the country. Yeah. So we are used to doing things in a regional sense, but we move amongst the department a lot, and people are well supported. So if people didn't understand the expectation and they weren't clear, they don't have to reach far or look far to understand what they need to do.
Yep. No, that's great. I know we struggle with that in New South Wales, just within the metropolitan area, having effective communication, let alone across New South Wales, which is quite extensive within itself. It's a challenge, and we don't have all the answers, but it's good to share and get some learnings. Thank you. I'm going to move to the Slido questions now, and I'll just read them out to the panel. So the most popular question there, another one's come in. Can you please share the psychological hazards that you wanted to address?
Look, I'm going to talk operationally first. Probably we're very well aware that the critical incident stress is an issue within emergency services. We've got a huge volunteer workforce and a huge career workforce. And you know, I've been with the department 29 years, and I'm well aware of the impact that critical incidents take and have on our people. We've had a good system in the past with peer support, and we've built on that with this process. But that from an operational point of view, we want to make sure our people are psychologically safe, they debrief properly, and they're well to respond again. So from my perspective, I want people safe and ready and well to respond and in a healthy mindset.
I think as well what we were trying to achieve with Thriving at DFES is to not just focus on mental ill health, and that was a big challenge for us. I think being in the emergency services, we are in that reactive space, and obviously we need to provide evidence-based support for our employees and volunteers who do end up impacted by mental ill health. But I think as well, unfortunately, too many organisations just focus on that cohort. So we wanted to spend a lot of time and energy also looking at, well, what are the other factors that impact the mental health and wellbeing of our people over and above critical incidents, and what can we do before the fact? So that's why we focused on Thriving at DFES, so that we could do a lot more work in the preventative space, in the hope that by providing those support avenues that people don't go down the mental ill health journey. Unfortunately, some will. We will never be able to prevent that for everyone. So I think trying to cover off on as many different support options and avenues as possible, but also with a strong note on critical incident support, because post-traumatic injury and post-traumatic stress disorder is obviously high in the emergency services.
Yep.
perhaps the only thing I can add to those responses is actually understanding what areas of emergency services we have the potential to change and influence. And we spoke a little bit earlier on about smart work design and having a look at some of the controllable factors in that area. There are some aspects of incident response that there's nothing that we can do to reduce demand, exposure. Some of the things that we know are really important in terms of the area of psychosocial risk as well. So what we want to do is come back and have a look at the other areas that we can improve, relations, working with others, mentorship, and then I'd come back and speak to, really importantly, what those promotion of your protective wellbeing activities and factors look like as well. The idea is that if you do face those psychosocial risks and you do have low-level symptoms, then ideally you will be able to effectively manage those is the message that we want to push to our workforce, and that people possess the skills and have the resiliency to make sure that they do bounce back from adversity and hard times. Unfortunately, there will be times where people, due to the nature of life, don't bounce back, and in that instance, there are those other components around providing professional care and professional help as well. But I guess for us, as an emergency services organisation, reactive support is not probably something that is uncommon or not familiar to our organisation, but I guess what we can do to be better is to make sure that our people are doing everything they can to make sure that they do bounce back from those times of adversity, and making sure that all those programs are available and contemporary and accessible and being participated in as well. And I think that's still an area of growth for us as an organisation.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so the next question. What was the motivator to commit to developing this strategy and action plan? For example, work cover claims, staff satisfaction surveys, etc. So what was the motivator to commit to developing the strategy?
How long do you have?
Ages.
All right, buckle in. Look, from our perspective, there were multiple reasons that we committed to this Thriving at DFES. First of all, we were already providing mental health and wellbeing support, as all agencies do. I suppose something that I really wanted and what we needed as a department was something structured to actually say, what are we doing in this space? Because not only so we used to have one team, the wellness team, and they were responsible for providing the support services pre and post-incident to make sure that our employees and volunteers are supported in the mental health and wellbeing space. So we were well aware of what was happening on the ground. We had a lot of people talk to us and say that they were struggling. We were seeing an increase in the number of critical incidents, which was definitely a driving force. I think as well there was an increase in workers' comp claims in the mental health and wellbeing space, which I think is happening across all agencies. And I think as well there was a growing need to understand, well, what are we doing in this space and what are the gaps? Because whilst the wellness team was the forefront of providing the mental health and wellbeing programs, there were things and activities being done by different areas across the state, but there was no solid document that actually pulled it all together to say this is what we're doing and why. And I think without having that core document, one, activities go unnoticed. Two, there's duplication where there doesn't need to be. And three, there's also huge service delivery gaps because there's nothing that says this is what we're doing. I think as well, there's then nothing that holds us accountable. And so I did feel with a lot of our programs that we'd be doing things, but if they didn't eventuate, did it matter? Because there was no formal document to say, well, this is what we have said that we need to do and this is what we need to do it by. So I think there was definitely that groundswell of people on the ground. I think as well, which is something very pleasing to see in the mental health and wellbeing space, is there's greater awareness and understanding of mental health and wellbeing in the workplace and in the general population. When I came to DFES 10 years ago, not many people came into our office to talk about mental health and wellbeing, and now it's about trying to close the door so that we can quarantine some time to do some actual work, because the conversation is there now, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm not saying that that means that all problems are solved, but I think having that that acceptance that mental health does exist, that it doesn't discriminate, that we do fluctuate on that mental health continuum throughout our life because we are people. Add on to that emergency services. So I think having that more acceptance and awareness of people wanting to talk about mental health and wellbeing and engage in those programs. And then of course on the flip side you had then all of the emerging research, and I think Beyond Blue and the research they did into the mental health and wellbeing of first responders was a huge game changer. It really put mental health and emergency services on the map. It's a shame that it took that piece of research to do it, but it really did, and it brought it to the forefront of a lot of organisations' mind to be like, okay, this is something. So I think that added to it, and then our organisation realised that if we don't do something in this space, we're going to suffer for it. Our biggest important factor at DFES is our people, and if our people are not mentally and physically fit and happy and healthy and engaging, they're not going to be able to do their job, whether that's an employee role or a volunteer role. And if they're not able to do their job, then we can't do what we're here to do, which is keep our community safe. So I think that was a long-winded way of saying a combination of what we were hearing from the people, what we were wanting to achieve in the mental health and wellbeing space, the research, and our leadership wanting to do something in this space.
Excellent. Any other comments from the panel? Have you noticed generational shift in terms of expectations? So, for example, frontline responders of 20 plus year service used to have to just get on with it and suck it up and debrief with crews after events and move on and be resilient. A new generation of recruit staff coming in are much more educated and aware of mental health and wellbeing and probably open to raising it as an issue, whereas in the past we sit back and no, we're tough, we can soldier through. So
absolutely, yes. I'll talk about my experience in terms of people. When I joined, we had a lot of former Vietnam veterans who were in the fire brigade, who didn't really talk about things a lot, and a lot of people managed their stress with alcohol, a lot of alcohol, and that thankfully is not as prevalent anymore. I do notice in the new generation coming through, they're much more open and they expect us to be delivering programs like this, which is what we're doing. And I think that's a much more healthier way of treating the stresses of our profession. So yes, to answer your question, it's a yes. The generation has changed. People are much more open, particularly men. Men will talk about their mental health a lot more openly, which is fantastic. And that's why these programs have to exist, so that we can help our people and keep them safe.
Yeah, I completely agree with what John has said. We provide information and support at each of the recruit schools, and when we first started doing it a number of years ago, there was always that hesitation and not a huge amount of engagement. You'd ask questions and nothing, and you'd crack jokes. Nothing, or maybe I'm just not funny, which is also a possibility. That's not what you meant to laugh at. And we've definitely found over the last few recruit schools that they've been really heavily engaged, motivated, signing up to our different programs straight away. And also, as you said, I think the awareness and information in just general society is a lot higher now. And so we're already, which is fantastic for us, we can spend our energy building on that base level understanding and information rather than having to develop that from scratch.
One of the things that's worked well, I guess, with the increased openness and willingness to seek out and engage with mental health and wellbeing information, fortunately for us, is also perhaps an increased openness to different ways of accessing that information. I know with the older demographic, again, the face-to-face delivery, the training program, the attendance, etc., typically are probably the more effective modes of information transfer. But the younger generation is clearly far more tech savvy. That's not a criticism of the older generations, but if they want to find something, the expectation is that they will, and they'll do that quite quickly. So I think that has a really great flow-on benefit to information transfer and promotion on station. What I will say in relation to that as well, though, is that the trust and respect amongst one another in terms of help giving and help seeking is probably the most important thing in the world as well. So it doesn't mean that you just throw a 5th or a 4th class firefighter on station and they tell their senior man how to act and where to go and what to do. You know, I do acknowledge that there is a component of building a trusting and confident relationship in the middle of that as well. And I guess for myself, that's where I see perhaps the DFES organisational culture changing over time, and those younger generations are going to be a huge influence. I always have a bit of a joke with the older emergency services personnel, and I say they've got about 4 emotions: happy, sad, angry and hungry. And you've got to work around sleepy, yeah, and you've got to work around those. But that being said, you know, there are still ways to engage and share and communicate with individuals who may have grown up in a time with arguably less access to emotional intelligence information. We've grown up with, I know when I was in high school, I still wasn't getting a lot of mental health information, but everyone coming through now, it's, you know, the first thing on the tip of their tongue. So we're really looking forward to riding that wave of momentum, for lack of a better description.
The next question was, what was the biggest change you've noticed in the DFES culture? But I think that's been adequately addressed, yeah. Okay, what was the most effective initiative you used in turning around stigma? That's a hard one, isn't it? Some of those things you touched on about recruit training and all that.
Yeah, look, I think I'm going to be the classic person that says it's a combination. But I really think it is, because different activities speak to different people. We've got metro, regional, we've got career, we've got volunteer, we've got old, young, male, female, non-binary. We've got all different versions of people in our organisation because we represent our community. And so I don't think one size fits all. So I would love to have the golden bullet, silver bullet, to say this is the program you must implement and therefore all your mental health and wellbeing challenges will be sorted. It doesn't work that way. So it is unfortunately about trying to provide as many different programs and activities so that at least something speaks to someone. But probably some of the notable ones would be getting involved in those more community-based events. So the Are You OK? Emergency specific Are They Triple OK events, that has been huge in promoting mental health and wellbeing in the workplace and doing that promotion, along with campaigns like Movember and the current push-up challenge, which I hope, Mitch, you've done your push-ups for the day. Yep, well done. So getting people involved in that, it's a really good way of bringing mental health and wellbeing to the forefront in a non-confrontational way, something that everyone can get involved in. So I think keeping those kind of teamwork activities is really important. I think another one that has been really important has been mental health training and education, in particular the Black Dog Institute Managing for Team Wellbeing's training. We've had really, really good feedback on that, because that course is specifically dedicated to supporting managers in mental health and wellbeing, because they are in that really tough role where they get a lot of work thrown at them 24/7. I mean, we are in emergency services, but they're not only responsible for their own mental health and wellbeing, because it is an extremely challenging role, but they're then responsible for the mental health and wellbeing of the people that they manage as well. So that's been really important training. I think as well, Headspace. We blow our subscriptions every single year, and whilst there are some sceptical people when it came to Headspace, it's been really pleasing to see over the years that the number of subscriptions goes up every single year, and we've actually blown it again this year, and so we need to get more subscriptions of people being able to use it, especially in the sleep space, because being in shift work, being constantly turned on, there definitely is a lot of sleep challenges in the emergency services, and so having that ability to listen to the sleepscapes has been really, really positive. Any of the other programs that, I mean, we could just list all of them, but I think those would be the key takeaways from my perspective.
Just one tiny little thing to add on the end there. I've found probably where some of the stigmas removed the most, in my experience, is some of our key consultative activities where, you know, there is still a sensitivity to discussing mental health and wellbeing. In my experience, a lot of that stigma is removed where psychological safety can be ensured, where people might feel comfortable or able to raise questions or make suggestions that might make them vulnerable to others' feedback or criticism. And I think that more and more we've been able to support environments where that's been managed well and successfully, and people haven't been ridiculed or haven't received any consequence. Every single time I see an environment where that occurs, I find, and we're biased, we're too close to it, we continue to see a lot of this where people openly share, but for me, every time someone engages in an environment like that and sees 20 or 30 of their colleagues around them feeling comfortable and able to share and being supported, that for me has been the most powerful component of continuing to break down the stigma. It's still there in many aspects, but there are certainly areas where I believe we're removing effectively, and I'm just gobsmacked because everywhere we go, people want to talk about it. And I do constantly remind ourselves that, that's not everywhere. We're lucky to work in a space where people have a real need and interest in conversation of mental health and wellbeing. And if we weren't in that space, this would be the hardest job in the world, I think. So it's actually made it for lack of a better description, a more pleasant experience for the two of us as well.
I think as well, another one, whether it's helped break down stigma and help normalise the conversations, has been the release of the R stories. So we're about to go into the third round now, and those were the posters and promotional material I showed before that shows each of our different people, but not in their uniform. They're in their plain clothes, and each of the stories is captured of something that interests them, something that supports their mental health and wellbeing. And I think showing those across the state and people, one, seeing their own, seeing people that they respect, but also getting out in the emergency services, because at the end of the day, we are all people. And I think seeing people of the different levels of the hierarchy, so we've got 2 chief superintendents who are actually some of our ambassadors, to go, oh, okay, you're a chief superintendent and you struggled with mental health. That's really good to know. And they're being open about it in our organisation, because there is still that fear that, one, I can't have a mental health problem, and if I do, I can't tell the organisation because I want to get above what my current rank is. And to have these people openly say, I've struggled with mental health and I'm okay and I'm still doing my job, and the organisation knows about it and this is my story, I think is a really powerful way to help demonstrate to people that you can struggle and it is okay, and you can continue to remain in the organisation and or be promoted. That's not going to be a limiting factor anymore. So that's been really powerful, probably more powerful than I expected it to be. And so we'll continue doing those different stories.
Yes, we all struggle with mental health issues from time to time. They could be temporary, it could be the weight of work balanced with family expectations or externalities. So it can be temporary, it can last a couple of days, or it can be long duration. There's no right or wrong. So I guess we've got to all be open to recognising and communicating that. So I noticed in one of my stories, one of the guys had some board shorts on with anchors on it. Like he must have been a Fremantle Dockers. Maybe that was why he had bad mental health or something. Is that
Ouch.
right?
No, I did also make that joke. No, he's Marine Rescue.
Oh, Marine.
So he's
okay,
going with the nautical theme, I think. But I'll let him know that was the consensus of the AFAC conference.
No, I like the Dockers there. Better than the Eagles, yeah. Only joking. I like the Cats. We'll move on to that one. Yeah. Okay, next one. Having a dedicated team is wonderful. How did you resource this? Was it through grants, bids for specific funding from government, or internal redirection of funds, or question mark? So all of the above, yeah.
The beloved resourcing question. So when we started on this journey, Mitch and I were in the wellness team, and Linda out the back there was newly come across to the department from Department of Health, and we were trying to develop a mental health and wellbeing strategy, wellbeing in the wellness team. For those of you in that space, you can understand how hard it is to do work in the proactive, preventative space when you're in a very reactively driven area. So every time we tried to sit down and write anything, we would be called to critical incident responding, or an individual who was struggling with mental health, or a meeting, or something was always drawing us away. And so I was effectively taken offline for a number of months to help start to write the strategy, as was Linda up the back there. And so we beavered away, starting to do the design and development of the strategy and action plan. And then once it all started to come to fruition and being looked at, yep, okay, we are going to be implementing this beast, the department made a new team, the Mental Health and Wellbeing team, or the Thriving at DFES team, which drew on current internal resources, but also we put a submission up to the Department of Treasury for some additional funding, which was granted. So the new positions that came on board was now the acting manager positions, which we currently sit in, as well as a health promotions position, which is what Rebecca sits in. So the team itself is now made up of a manager position, a mental health and wellbeing coordinator position, which is Emily's, so she's responsible for coordinating more of the mental health and wellbeing programs because of her background in psych. We've then got an exercise physiologist position, which Scott holds, which looks at more of the physical health and wellbeing, and then we've got a health promotions position, which Rebecca or Beck holds, looking at more of the health promotions and training, and then we've got a part-time admin support as well. So we are very, very fortunate that the department managed to find internal resourcing for this, as well as Department of Treasury resourcing, so that we have a team solely dedicated to delivering and developing the strategy and action plan, because I truly believe if we were still in the one team, whilst there are definite benefits of that in regards to collaboration and cohesiveness and probably understanding in the organisation, you're constantly pulled into the reactive. You can't not. There's no way you can self-justify, I can't help respond to this critical incident because I'm writing a strategy or I'm doing an evaluation. It doesn't cut the mustard. So having two separate teams has been an absolute game changer for us.
One little thing to add to that, I think complementary to the establishment of our new team as well, there was an organisational restructure which enabled the creation of our team and the ability to resource us to be able to take on this work. What was lovely was to see the other key areas of human resources and safety who are in the, for lack of a better description, health or risk mitigation space. So our health and safety services, our wellness counterparts, our workers' comp injury management teams, all had the recognition that something needed to be done to help move into a preventative and proactive space as well. And to see the recognition from all those other three key areas which provide essential support mechanisms was really important for us, for the establishment of our team, for the belief and confidence in what we do, but also for that advocacy and selflessness from other teams to go, we need someone protected and dedicated to be doing this work. Otherwise, the areas that we're working in, you have that risk with workplace stresses and mental health stresses of continuing to not be able to address increasing needs and challenges that we're now facing. So it was really, really nice to see other teams as well to throw support our way and to see the value in making sure that someone was positioned to tackle that work as well. Not sure we'd be positioned here without that green light and that support from others as well.
I know in New South Wales we've been on a similar journey that you guys have undertaken, and I started 4 years ago and we had one wellbeing coordinator, that was it, in the mental health and wellbeing space. And then we encountered the Black Summer bushfires, and that led to a lot of anxiety and trauma, and we're lucky enough to put a business case into Treasury and government to get some funding to really invest and resource our mental health and wellbeing team. So we've gone from 1 to 11, we've got 5 org psychs now employed, and a wellbeing coordinator, a mental health wellbeing manager, and wellbeing coordinators that support each of our areas across the state. So from 1 to 11 is pretty good, but you know what? It's not enough. Like you said, coming and knocking on the door, like we could double that and still, just be able to provide the service that's required there. So the demand is up here, the service level's going that way, but still a long way to go. I know Bernie, he was here before, he's got the same journey happening in Queensland. So yeah, that's good stuff. So I guess the next question was then, leading into that, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was it to get buy-in for your strategy? 10 being good.
From what, 1 to 10?
From 1 to 10, yeah.
Depending on the day. Look, no, to be honest with you, I would say I recently listened to a podcast that said you cannot give a rating of 7 out of 10 because it's a pointless number. You either have to give it a 6, which means it's not that great, you have to give it an 8, which means it's really good. So because of that, I'm going to say, I'm going to be an absolute optimist here and say 8.5 buy-in. I think, to be honest with you, the buy-in on the ground was huge. People know that there's mental health and wellbeing problems. I think we've gone past an age where you can just put it to the side, bury our heads in the sand and go, you know what, if I ignore this mental health challenge, it'll go away. I think we're all knowledgeable enough and aware enough that mental health does exist in the general population and more so in the emergency services. And I think because of that, and unfortunately because people, if they haven't been impacted by mental health personally, they've seen someone who has been, we've all been touched by it in some capacity. And I think people were really at a point, well, probably well before we started developing strategy and action plan, that there was a huge need. We realised that the department needed to be doing more in this space. They needed to be better. They needed to commit more and follow through on that commitment. So I think the people on the ground were really invested and engaged and wanting something to happen in this space, which we saw through the overwhelming amount of engagement through the consultation engagement process, hence it ended up taking 6 months. Of course, there were the people who were hesitant. I don't think you're ever not going to have the people who are hesitant about it. And to be honest with you, we did get some backlash, and I remember getting contacted by a firefighter who was like, this is just not going to happen. You're saying you're going to do all this stuff and you're not. And I said, I will come and meet you. And I drove a very long way and I sat down with the individual and he was convinced that it wasn't going to happen. And I sat down, went through all the concerns, and then throughout the strategy, contacted them to say, this is what we're doing to address your feedback or to address your concerns. We are doing this, but we can't do that. And yes, that was only one person, but his view of what our team was trying to achieve and the outcomes of it completely changed over the process because they saw that we were genuinely invested in it. We were taking on board. That's not to say we can take on everyone's feedback and do everything that everyone wants. That's just not possible, unless of course we get huge resourcing. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So I think spending that time really developed that rapport and support from the people on the ground. So I think the want from them was always there. I think the middle managers were crying out for more support, so we had their support in it. And then it was about getting leadership on board. And I think having 3 executive sponsors to help champion in the leadership space to say it is their responsibility as well to take this on board and to walk the walk and really commit to it was a game changer. I can't quite now remember what the question was.
The 1 to 10.
1 to 10, yes. The 8.5. And that's not to say that we have achieved everything that everyone wanted. We are by no means perfect, but I think, yeah, the want for something in this space was there, and we will just continue to grow and develop on that with Thriving at DFES 2.0.
Yep.
No pressure.
No, that's fine. Okay. So next question's a good one about how did you apply your strategy to the volunteer cohort?
It sounds like a throwaway line, but regional and volunteer engagement forms the very first consideration in addition to public servant and career access as well to any program or service we develop or deliver. That's not for a second to suggest that everything is accessible and available across our organisation. It's not. But we can say hand on heart that everything we look to develop or deliver is done so with a consideration as to how we can make it as broadly available around the state as possible. Broad state, again, we've spoken about the preferences for differing modes of communication, but it means there has needed to be an openness to online information transfer. We only get those abilities to do regional visits around the state a couple of times a year to different locations as well. So they continue to be hugely effective activities, and you can see the benefit when you visit these locations, just due to the reception and appreciation for the information and knowledge and resources that are provided as well. But that's probably the best response I could provide, which is everything we do, other than perhaps a few of our pilot programs that we've only initially trialled in the career space, and admittedly some of that is around the trial, the evaluation, the nature of increased exposure for our career workforce as well. But a lot of those pilot programs are being tackled with, I guess, an evaluation component around how they could be applied more broadly to the rest of our organisation as well. And we need to do that with some of our pilot programs, because we just don't have the funding or resources available to try everything broadly all at once as well. So, yeah, it has formed a very, very strong consideration of what we do.
I think in regards to communication and tailoring our programs as much as possible, we've made a huge effort to, like I said, engage our people. So knowing that volunteers also may only meet weekly or monthly, depending on where they are, we have had to allow for very long timeframes in regards to getting feedback and rolling things out. So, you know, we start promoting Are You OK and different events months in advance, because they're not employees who check their emails every single day, and so we have to be cognizant of that. So some bushfire brigades in the north of the state meet once a month, so we can't expect them to be able to promote stuff the day before or the day of. So making sure that the communications are planned well in advance. Also ensuring that they are representative on our reference group, and also engaging the volunteer association. So each of the different services that we represent, the career firefighters have the United Professional Firefighters Union, who we consult heavily with, as do each of the volunteers services have an association. So one of their representatives is on our reference group, but we also proactively contact them before programs are launched, activities are undertaken, so that they are involved. They can tell us of any major problems or issues that they see, but also they can help spread the word through their own modes of communication as well, whether they've got open days coming up, their own newsletters, their own communication fronts. So it's really about stakeholder mapping and trying to figure out who your best people are, and then getting them to help you with the engagement. And I think providing different tools as well to help them. So we don't just go to the associations and the unions and our representatives to go, oh, we want you to promote this activity. We do all that legwork for them. So we make the posters, even though we are not media people. We do the speaking notes, we do the slides, we do the whatever it is that they need. So it makes it as easy as possible for those people out there to then take on the message. It also means that you're also getting a consistent message out there, which is vitally important.
How did you accommodate and reflect the needs of cultural diversity in relation to the program? So how were those elements taken into consideration?
Well, actually, I'm going to be really cheeky here and hand over to Linda Blum, who looks after culture and diversity. Can I hand over to you?
I'll use my voice, it's okay.
People online won't be able to hear you.
I think it is a challenge. I think it's a challenge when we are trying to embed inclusive practices across an area such as mental health and wellbeing. And I think we need to always be thinking about mental health and wellbeing as having many contributors that can impact one's health. So I'm thinking about how we relate to each other. And I think it's really tricky because certain people are attracted to training and other people are not. And so the challenge, I think, in this space is how do we get the broad church to actually see it as part of their responsibility. And I suppose one of the key messages that Charlotte and I worked on was that last message in the 10 key messages about working together. And working together means that you include everyone, which means you include a diversity of thought. And I think traditionally our services have been very, how would I say it politely? Yes, perhaps the approach has been single-minded, and now as a community we're being asked, have we thought about others? And I think we've still got more to do in this space. I don't think we've nailed it yet. And I think the best thing that we can all do after today is to go to our respective workplaces and check in with the people we work with, because I think you'll find there's a diversity of thinking in there, but perhaps we haven't tapped into that to say what more can we do in the space of mental health and wellbeing? What more can we do to be more inclusive in our practices? How do you challenge the way you think? Because I think often we already have a preconceived idea about the other, and sometimes I'd ask you just to reflect and ask, how are you going today? And I think managers also have a role there to check in with their people, because often you can be very task focused and the relationship stuff can fall us to the side because we're so driven and required, obligated to do the job. But sometimes the job will be done better by just checking in to the person next to you. I think we need to do more of that, and that's where I'd say inclusion is truly part of mental health and wellbeing.
Thank you, Linda, and I owe you a big coffee for that. And I think as well, it's just making sure that you've got a representative cohort that you're checking in with. So you're not just checking in with the people you know, and that is definitely something we could be biased in. You know who the mental health and wellbeing advocates are, and they're the easy people to go to get feedback. But making sure that you've got representative people on your committees who can provide that feedback is vital. And we've managed to do that, but as Mitch said, it is hard for the life of a 3-year strategy and action plan. So we do make sure that if we notice that there is either a service or a region or a culture or something that is not represented in our group, we readily go through it and go, right, we've lost this individual, and therefore we need to find someone else who would represent that area.
And those improvements come with time anyway. I mean, starting out on the journey, it's a relatively new program, so you can't get excellence all straight at once, but getting it pretty good up front's a good feather in your cap. So, cool. Okay. What were the measures that you used to evaluate the program? Was it only the Smart Design survey? And how many employees participated?
Okay, so this will be a quick one. So as we said, a number of our different activities have inbuilt evaluation measures, which is fantastic. So the Black Dog Institute training all do pre-post measures, which is fantastic. So you can really get a good understanding of not only how the people or the participants felt about the training, but also their confidence, their knowledge, everything in that space. How was it before versus post? So there's also evaluation measures in the mood food programs that we just went, pilot program we went through. There was also evaluation measures in Mind Armour as well. So a lot of the big ticket items did have inbuilt measures, which is good. So we have been evaluating those throughout the course of the strategy and action plan. But evaluating the strategy and action plan as a whole will be undertaken by the FOWI's Thrive at Work survey. Unfortunately, we did not get a baseline measure. Especially being a psychologist, that does irk me a bit. We weren't able to undertake the survey before we launched, so we don't have a baseline measure, but we will be sending out the survey in a couple of months' time. So we can't tell you how many people have participated because it's not opened yet, but that will give us a measure as to where the mental health and wellbeing of our cohort sits now, and that will be undertaken every couple of years as we go through the next iterations of Thriving at DFES. And that survey itself evaluates the entire framework, so each of the 3 pillars and the 9 building blocks, and then we're also able to add in specific questions about the different programs. So we will be seeking specific feedback on our key programs, so the psychological support service, the peer support program, the different trainings we're undertaking, so that we can get that feedback as well from our people.
Excellent. Okay, so has the program changed the ways in which help or support can be accessed? I assume that's a big yes.
Easy answer is yes, but I guess the useful information is ways in which this has occurred. I was having a discussion just before in between sessions around some of the family focused components of the work that we do as well, and we probably haven't spoken to
the fact that we do try and take an approach where if things can be made more broadly available to support networks, friends and families of emergency services staff and volunteers, we will also adopt a preference for that approach as well. We know that overall wellbeing, generally isn't just attributed to one individual, that there are others around that person who support or identify, have meaningful conversations, notice different signs and symptoms as well. So I think part of it is making sure that we're making that information more broadly accessible, and nowhere in our presentation this morning did we, I guess, raise the important consideration of what those inner support networks look like and how they function and how important they are to the mental health and wellbeing of our first responder organisation as well. So I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, but it's definitely another component of overall wellbeing. And I guess we're speaking a little bit around what our model of support looks like, and the fact that we could sometimes be criticised or questioned for not throwing all of the professional supports and resources at people initially, but we've always developed and used a model of influence around identifying and noting the effectiveness of your internal support mechanisms to begin with. Not because we don't want to help or we don't want others to help, but I think the most important thing for our people is that they're empowered and reminded that in just about all instances of life, they will bounce back and their own health and wellbeing and protective measures will work effectively. If they don't, and when other things occur, then we will look at those secondary and outer support mechanisms, being the professional help, the EAPs, the peer support programs, etc. as well. But I guess it is reminding people that in a lot of instances they do have their own skills, confidence, belief, techniques, and available supports that are effective as well. And I think it's a really important thing to remind people that adopting that approach is arguably your best protective mechanism as an individual as well. So we don't promote that because we don't care or we don't want to help. We promote that because we think that is the thing that's in the best interest of our people as well.
I think as well, having a document that pulls together everything that's available has actually made it quite clear for people, because I'm assuming every single person, I'm looking at the DFES people here, have read the document from the front cover to the back page. They're nodding. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, guys. I think having a document that pulls it all together so everyone can see, oh, wow, this is actually what we do. And obviously we have duplicated that online. So in the volunteer hub, it's very clear under the support banner. They click on that and all the different support services come up, from headspace to mental health training to peer support program to psych support services. So it's very clear. The employee area is a little bit more challenging because it's currently by command, but we are pulling that all together. So you can go to the Thriving at DFES page and then all of the activities are there. So hoping to help reduce the work on the end user on which services and how they can engage with them. We also try and promote them readily. So every month there is a volunteer newsletter, and so every single month our team puts in a little section in the newsletter that promotes a different mental health and wellbeing service as well. So just to keep that continual communication going, just to remind people, and we do that with our career cohort as well through general circulars. So just constantly reminding it and trying to make it as easy as possible for people to find the information, but it's an ever-changing beast, and we definitely don't do it perfectly, but we're getting there.
Okay, the next question was, with the commitment or the buy-in sort of effectively or generally rated as 8.5, what would our career staff rate it, and what would volunteer staff rate it, if they were given the chance to give a rating?
So as in how much they wanted the strategy and action plan?
Yes.
Look, I know the career staff have been wanting improvements for many years, so I think the people I talk to are very happy with what's going on. They understand they're getting a superior amount of support and better engagement. People are enjoying the push-up challenge, the Are You OK days, and all the things that come with that. So I believe that they're enjoying it. But Vox Pop with the guys at the table, yes or no? Yeah, okay, so one yes, one halfway, one no, yeah, okay, so, all right, I'm working on the positive. I mean, in terms of volunteers, I would probably throw to Charlotte and see what you know about volunteers.
Yeah, again, I think there is just the constant want and need for better support in this space. I think we're more aware and we understand the impact of our daily lives on our mental health. I think we're becoming much better at admitting when we're struggling ourselves, and we're wanting to engage in support services. So I think there was never a question on if the volunteers and career staff and corporate staff wanted a mental health and wellbeing strategy. Maybe the strategy itself isn't overly important to every single person, but definitely the action plan is. They want movement in this space. They're crying out for more support, more help, so that when they are injured mentally or they are struggling, it's there for them, but also to help prevent that. So I think the want is always there. It's just whether we can execute it through the strategy and action plan. And we're 2 and a bit years in. I think we have delivered on a lot. I think we are quite proud of what we've delivered on. Again, we're not perfect, and there are definitely lessons learned and things that we'll be taking into consideration for version 2.0, and there's always room to move, but I think the want is definitely there. It's now just about trying to figure out what that want is and how we can get that into deliverables.
Excellent.
I think if you ask different pockets around the state, you'll find different responses and explanations depending on where you go and who you ask. And I don't say that as if it's not an important issue or a challenge or an ongoing area of improvement for us. Anecdotally speaking from my experience, unfortunately, DFES has been wonderful in providing lots of travel opportunities around the state to engage with different areas of the business. And I'm constantly surprised by how engaged and how much benefit and how much insight some groups will have around thriving at DFES and the activities they engage with, which when you ask them, if they're doing one, there's a good chance they're doing a bunch of them. But in saying that, I go to arguably just as many environments where they haven't heavily engaged and they aren't in participating in programs or activities. And I look at thriving at DFES as really sound, effective words on paper, but I think if people challenge us, career and volunteer, I think what they'll say is, how has this benefited me? What's in it for me? If I've used it, what have I used? And if I haven't, why have I not? And honestly, that's probably the greatest challenge for revitalising and reinvigorating thriving at DFES 2.0, which is there aren't benefits being attained by everyone in the organisation. If not, why not? The program's not contemporary. Have we not promoted it or made it available? Do you not see a benefit in it for you? I think if we can explore that component of why have people chosen not to engage or participate, if they have even made that decision selectively, then that's really powerful information for us to know and for us to tackle. But I do believe that we are seeing the same champions and advocates continuing to push and promote this information. They're doing it really selflessly and effectively. But we need champions everywhere, and we're not quite there yet either. And again, I think that's a really great challenge for us moving forwards, to make sure that all our volunteers and emergency services staff are in one way or another benefiting or knowing that there are contemporary and beneficial programs that are available for them. And again, area of growth, we're not doing that perfectly yet.
I think as well, trying to remind people that they don't have to engage in mental health and wellbeing activities when they're in the red zone, so when they're already struggling. I think traditionally people think, okay, I'll reach out to mental health and wellbeing support services, or I'll engage in those activities once I'm struggling, which yes, please continue to do. But also we're trying to change the narrative to say, please start engaging in those support services before you're struggling. So downloading the Headspace app before you have 2 weeks of not sleeping, I should have taken my own advice on that one. Engaging in the training before we're struggling, engaging in those activities before the fact. So I think that's a message we need to continually promote to help create that groundswell of, did we need this or not?
Yep. Excellent. It's a really interesting topic, and you can see by the range of questions generating a lot of good discussions. The next question, answering the call showed low levels of use and usefulness of internal programs. Can you provide examples of changes you've made that have been successful? Pretty much covered that sort of already.
So changes in programs?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, so I would definitely say there has, since the launch of Thriving at DFES, there's been a significant increase in the uptake of Headspace mindfulness app that has gone up in subscriptions every single year without fail. There's definitely been an increased appetite for training, but also specific training. So for managers, that was definitely a service delivery gap for DFES, that we weren't providing specific mental health training for our managers. So that has definitely seen a big uptake in the request for it and then attendance. We've also seen an increase in our psychological support service, also known as the EAP in most organisations, but we changed the name because it also supports our volunteers. This was achieved through increased communication, but also we increased from 2 to 3 providers, and we'll also be doing some smaller boutique providers so that people can get a tailored psychological support if they need it in different mental health areas. So I definitely think there has been an increase in the uptake of our internal services, whether that's due to making sure that the enhancements or the improvements of the services have been undertaken but from what our people requested, or whether it's through better communication of them or better access. It's probably a combination. But we are also very good at promoting external services, because we understand at the end of the day, people may not want to use our internal services, and that's completely okay. At the end of the day, we just want you guys to get help if you need it. So we do promote in all of our communications and on our pages external support services as well, so that if people do want to engage in support but not through the agency, they can do so.
Yep, that's great, thank you. Okay, reflecting on the implementation plan, is there anything you'd look back and say we should have done that, or we probably wouldn't do that again?
It was easy to blame the challenges around getting it out and about and putting the DFES strategy and action plan in front of people, but some degree of a roadshow where we could have hit some key pockets and regions around the state to really meet with people, engage face-to-face in not just information delivery, but some of our consultative practices for information and two-way communication, I think would have really helped a lot. We've really seen some key successes in local ownership, where pockets and champions have taken on board key responsibilities and really driven some really successful campaigns themselves as well. And I don't think it would have taken too much for us, given a little bit more time and energy, to be able to explore where those champions are, who has a passion, who has an ability, and who may have been able to help us really strengthen the launch and implementation activities at a local level. Because at the end of the day, you know, there are little I guess, environments and cultures and ecosystems that exist within DFES. And we actually see some areas that do this stuff amazingly well as we go around the state especially. And it's actually really nice as well to be able to look at some lessons learned around why in some smaller community areas, you know, why are they doing mental health and wellbeing in some aspects better than we are in, you know, the big city with the metrocentric focus as well. So there's always some really interesting mutual benefits or unintended benefits of doing those visits. Opens our eyes, and we learn a lot more around what closeness and what community means and how that can protect people as well. So yeah, given our time going back to launch and implementation, I think being able to do more of that work would have also helped the effectiveness and the understanding of follow-on communications and follow-on updates after the fact as well. So really easy to describe that, but I do know how effective I think that would have been had we been able to do that in 2021.
I think another, if we could go back and do it again, would definitely be to get that baseline measure of mental health and wellbeing. So ideally, before the launch on the 1st of July 2021, we would have rolled out the survey platform to get a snapshot of where was the mental health and wellbeing of our workforce at that point in time, so that when we do it again in a couple of months' time, we can go, okay, well, over the 2.5 year span, it's stayed the same, it's got worse, it's got better. We can infer it from people on the ground, we can infer it from this strategy, and we are going to try and add in a question there that says, do you think there has been a positive or negative or no change over the lifespan? But ideally, we would have got that perfect measurement beforehand and then we'd get it after. Unfortunately, we didn't. So that is a definite takeaway for our organisations here. Please do that. But yeah, so face-to-face in the survey would be the two major things.
No worries. It's hard to get that baseline initially, and sometimes you just have to start the program and then revisit that in due course. So, yep.
And it's also whether it'll be representative given the size of our organisation.
Exactly.
Unless I go around to every single person and make every single person complete the survey, which I can't do. That'll be interesting as well.
Yep. Okay. Does the mental health wellbeing team, health promotion team look after workers' compensation issues, or is that a separate? Yep.
That's a completely separate area. So in the mental health, wellbeing, workers' comp, health and safety area, we have a wellness team, and that team is made up of wellness officers, so career firefighters who have come into a wellness team, a critical incident coordinator, a chaplain and a district officer of wellness. And that wellness team is more focused on looking at the reactive side of mental health and wellbeing, so supporting volunteers and career staff after an incident, providing pastoral care support and education more after the fact. The mental health and wellbeing team who you have here today, we are more responsible for the proactive preventative programs and obviously the delivery of Thriving at DFES. We then have a separate workers' comp and injury management team who look after all of the claims, both physical and mental, for employees and volunteers. And then we have a separate health and safety services team who look after health and safety. So we are distinct teams. We do collaborate and consult where appropriate. So there are collaborative meetings between workers' comp and wellness to ensure that holistic and health and safety, to make sure that a holistic approach is taken. But yes, we are distinct teams, but all within the Human Resources and Safety Directorate.
Okay, cool. The images and the messages about thriving, when you thrive and that we thrive, they're pretty powerful, which is, good feedback. It says, it's great that art was used as a medium. Were any of the stories shared work-related?
Yes, so there is a combination of them. We wanted individuals to share their story. A lot of them do cross over because we can't just have issues in one part of our life or compartmentalise it, unfortunately. We live in a day and age where work life interacts with personal life and personal life impacts on work life, and at the end of the day we're also humans. So most of the stories actually touch on both, so maybe traumas that they've experienced in the workplace as well as personal traumas or issues, mental health challenges that they've had. And so it does cover both work, personal. Some are just personal, some are just work, but the majority of them see a combination of that.
Okay, with uniformed firefighters being 3/4 of the paid workforce, do the measures show that they're proportional, that they proportionally use the tools as much as other workforce members? Do you have any data or information on that? Or?
So we don't, for all of our programs, we don't always capture who's attending. Ironically, a lot of the training is probably more volunteer attendance than career attendance, but we are now providing some training opportunities that are just for career to help get up those numbers. It is a challenge trying to deliver mental health training over a shift cycle with call-outs, so that is a definite challenge, and I think that's something that all organisations struggle with. In regards to our psych support service, it is more employees than volunteers who access it. So I don't necessarily see a significant increase in the number of career firefighters who use the services over volunteers. But we don't always capture that data because we're also mindful of making sure that our program's as confidential and anonymous as possible.
Yep.
And we do find sometimes ticking that box of which area do you work in can hinder someone. We also have a lot of people who are career as well as volunteer, so that skews the data as well because they represent both.
Yep. With the program to date, have you done any benchmarking across similar programs internationally?
Not internationally, no. Benchmarking of other programs, we have looked at the interjurisdictional research to make sure that what we are providing is in line with industry standards and other organisations, but we will be able to compare how we're doing following the survey. So sorry, we don't have much information in that space yet. Ask us in December and we will, hopefully.
I think the work that you're doing is well advanced and streaks ahead of another number of organisations across the country, so credit to you. Okay, last question, because I know we're going to wrap it up for lunch very soon, but when you look at the strategy, what's the one inclusion that you are most proud of?
Answer here. You want to go first?
I enjoyed Movember the most. I think that was good. That was a bit of fun. So yeah.
I think as well with Movember, what we did, which I thought was really cool, is we engaged with the other emergency services as well. So we did a collective effort between WA Police, St John Ambulance and DFES. Not only I wasn't growing a mo, but we also did a lot of the Move for Movember. So we did a series of walks in different areas to help increase buy-in and participation in Movember, but also to show a collective force of the emergency services. I'm probably most proud of the Our Stories. I think that was a really unique idea and a really powerful way to engage our people and to really help break down the stigma around mental health and wellbeing, and to show that you can be anyone in the organisation and still be impacted by mental health and wellbeing, but also, most importantly, that they're positive stories as well. That's not to say that our people didn't go through hardships, they definitely did, but to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that they used support services. And I think two key messages came out of it. One, they used support services, both internal and external to DFES, but they also used multiple things. And I think that's probably a message that isn't always promoted enough, that, one meeting with a counsellor isn't going to solve it, or, one mindfulness exercise isn't going to cut the mustard, that they did a multiple, activity approach, and they've also consistently done that to proactively look after the mental health and wellbeing. So I think promoting those stories has been really powerful.
Yep. So I've got two. I know you asked me for one. One exciting one boring one for most people, but I think having the program embedded in annualised business reports and work plans, it's not the sexy and attractive one, but it really demonstrates internally, especially, that the department does address the need and importance of this very, very, very highly. To have it embedded in those work processes, for us internally, means that it's not going away, that we are constantly providing updates, we are constantly being asked from different areas of the organisation as to what's going on. Although that creates pressure and concern, that's really, really healthy for tackling this issue, and something in hindsight that we're really excited about. The interesting one for me, I think, is the reference groups. To start with, it was probably something where myself and others, we needed to be vulnerable enough, I guess, to put ourselves in an environment where we're seeking that information, that honest two-way communication and that open feedback. I'm not aware of many avenues in the organisation or channels where we've had those options available to us previously, other than maybe the odd workshop, etc. So knowing that we've got something now that's continually incorporated into the calendar year, 3 or 4 occasions, that provide that hour and a half opportunity to provide direct, meaningful feedback, for me is the 100% the right direction to be going in. I don't think we'll head back and stop those activities, and I think it's just going to grow in terms of what information our workforces want to give back to the organisation, how they want to be heard, how they want to be represented, and I guess to make sure that they understand the organisation is receiving that information and being tasked with doing something with it as well. I just think that's a really, really big step in the right direction of open and honest two-way communication as well. So that'd be an absolute highlight for mine.
despite the fact it does cause me a bit of stress running those.
Thanks, Mitch. So we're going to wrap that up now, but I just want to say, Charlotte and Mitch and John, thank you so much for your time to answer the questions on the panel. Thank you for all your preparation and honesty and openness in sharing the information today. Big congratulations again on winning the Leading Practice Award. We can really see why you did, and you should give yourselves a big pat on the back because it's excellent, so thank you. And Simon, thank you again for sponsoring the Stewart and Heaton Award, and we're going to break for lunch now for half an hour. So if we're in New Zealand, back at 4:30, Eastern States 2:30, Northern Territory, South Australia 2, and for us 2 p.m. and for us 12:30. So thank you. Righto, welcome back everybody. Thanks for joining us again after lunch. Hope the lunch was good. We've got our second presentation today from Associate Professor Karina Juritsma from Curtin University. So Karina is going to talk about creating thriving workplaces through the smart work design, the SMART. So that should be interesting to hear. So just a bit of a bio on Karina. She's a Professor of Practice at Curtin University's Future of Work Institute. It's a newly established research institute which promotes productive and meaningful work as essential foundations of a healthy economy and society. And I think that goes back into the essence of the importance of work to our well-being and having purpose and those type of things. And old Maslow's hierarchy of needs probably gets a few boxes ticked in that space, I'd imagine. Karina holds over 15 years' experience, spending her career in dual roles, the nexus between academia and practice, which is really good. She's successfully delivered more than 100 multidisciplinary projects with many high-profile clients in both public and private sectors across a range of industries including healthcare, mining, emergency services, law enforcement, and also the Royal Australian Navy, which would be really interesting. Karina currently leads the Thrive at Work practice, which is a partially state-funded wellbeing initiative centred on creating and providing organisations with the knowledge and tools to design, implement and sustain healthy and high-performing work environments. So please welcome Karina from the Future of Work Institute.
Thanks everyone. I'm delighted to be here today, and I have some idea of what you've been talking about earlier today, so hopefully I'm extending upon some of those things, rather than duplicating in any way. I've titled this Leading Smart Work today as really this sort of idea of unpacking what is meant by good work design. But really what I want to do is actually unfold from that really practical ways that are not around that formal work design or just formal work design that you think about often when we talk about work design. That's here. So already had an introduction to what the Future of Work Institute is, but I guess what we really are looking at is supporting thriving people and organisations. When we're established, it was, in the digital age since COVID, that took new meanings as we all had much more lived experience of what that technology and teams and things were, but really, rapid change. And a part of that is the Centre for Transformative Work Design too, which is really where the smart work design model comes out of. Now, I did put up here, we do a lot of different things. We look at work design and we look at the whole spectrum of wellbeing through from mental ill health, through to performance and endurance. And as an example of some of the projects that we do, I have worked with the Defence Force for the last 7 years on the design of our future submarines. So we're really looking at good human elements or designs around those practices, which is not often considered. Now, we've had many a change here over the last several years around our design too. We were nearly on our way to an attack class submarine, and now we've had to pivot around that, but that's just one of the, so some of it's more technical systems and some of this is actually much more soft policies and procedures and those sorts of things that we're talking about. So yes, first, why work design is what I want to walk through. Talk about what does work design, smart work design look like, what factors shape our work, and what you can do in your role to support smarter work design. And I'm taking that from a role of yourself in your job, yourself as a leader, and potentially your role in varying wellbeing roles as well, and support and systems roles that are there. And I'm kind of conscious that we've started later over lunch, so I'm going to try to bring you back onto time for the day. So I will try keep you all to time, so I'll go a little bit quicker around some of this stuff. But first of all, I have been engaged with DFES for, well, many years actually, since I had started with my PhD, which was around physical safety with DFES when it was FESA back in the day, more than 20 years ago actually. But in more recent years, you know, discussions around the sort of structure of wellbeing branch, EAP services, and a lot of different things, and had the pleasure of DFES joining us as well for a Public Sector Thrive Masterclass that's there. So I've been peripherally involved around this along the way, and it's been a really great to have seen the journey, I suppose, of DFES coming along, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about what DFES is doing along the way. I guess what I'm planning to do today is deep dive a bit further into this prevent harm, you know, space, which is the bit that everyone across all industries are struggling. That it's sort of where we're at next, is how do we really dig into this section. Now, I guess the first thing that I want to start with is, you know, what do we mean by wellbeing? And for some, you know, it's actually the absence of ill health when we talk about wellbeing. Perhaps it's not broken, you know, and for some, or, you know, it's fulfilling our potential. Perhaps it's all of these things, but I think that this sort of distinction that's here is a really important distinction to make, because what we are doing to support individuals at each of these areas is different, actually. And so what we did when we developed the Thrive initiative too was really extend upon, took a long time around mental health continuums, to really go, when we talk about wellbeing and then when we talk about thriving, what we mean is this spectrum from ill health through to beyond healthy, through to that thriving end of the spectrum. And at the thriving end of the spectrum, we're actually talking about high productivity, engagement, empowerment, whereas when we're talking about well-being, for a lot of the time it's in this normal functioning healthy kind of behaviour, and when we're talking about sort of prevent harm, we're really talking about that maintaining health versus, you know, not breaking, you know, space that we're in. And so if I sort of flip this question and I go, what can we do to support our well-being? I guess when we're really talking about, if we're defining well-being around the absence of ill health, we're often talking about the type of interventions that we do, which are about things like seeking support, right? That the health promotion, stigma reduction, all the awareness campaigns and things are really in that space of what happens when people are experiencing ill health, and the type of interventions that you're trying to engage in are often those ones which are support seeking. And I imagine many of you here are engaged in, and you've talked about today, the different types of initiatives and the ways in which you're getting people to try access seeking of those supports. Now, some of the things that sort of sit in that early detection or support for people's space might be resilience or coping type of strategies, you know, and a number of initiatives that sit within those campaigns and awareness and training and toolkits that are there. And then potentially, you know, in that thriving space, we're talking about other lifelong learning and training and opportunities that are here. In the positive psych space, that, you know, even things like potentially having access to mindfulness training or sport, varying things, but that are, it's really important that they are the things that you want to do and are self-selected, you know, things that might be important in that space. All of these things are really important, really valid, really useful things, but are often actually the space in which we find that most wellbeing initiatives and practices across all industries are still very much at this. These are very individual focused things, right? This is what can organisations give for individuals to help support them in their mental health and wellbeing journeys. And what we find is that a lot of the times, you know, we're talking about like that things like, you know, if people are stressed, and we talk about our EAP provision, we talk about people who are, you know, having performance issues, or we've got bullying, incivility, varying things. We're talking about training type of activities that are there, you know, less so maybe fun zones, but, you know, some design thinking sprints that happen around that sort of innovation kind of space that's there. All of these things kind of get done, and what's often at the cause of a lot of the different wellbeing outcomes for people is actually the work that they do and the aspects of the work that they do. So whilst it's really important to have these individual strategies that are supporting people, so seeking of help, coping and resilience, opportunity for these learnings, what we have at the base of this, you know, prevention-based space is also the work in the work itself. That's important. And before I go through, so there's going to be magic that's going to happen in the background, I think, right now. If I asked you to think of your worst job or your best job, and what is one feature of this job that made it so positive or negative? If you use your Slido that I think you've all got access to, you can put, there's no Slido, why? You don't want to do? Yeah, okay, sorry. Yep, we're good. I don't mind which you put, right? So the first thing that comes to your mind, think about the worst one or the best one and put in what it was. Now, it's all, yeah, anonymous is going to come up as a word cloud, and I just want to unpack this. There's one here. What have we got going on? All right. So, manager, people is coming up, and that can be good or bad, right, in this space, but the influence or the relationship with a manager, I'm seeing things that I'm assuming most of you are, you know, saying that I'm going to pick which ones are the bad ones, right? So micromanaging, you know, unrealistic workloads, no control, whereas on the opposite side, like a positive is like the supportive manager, friends, clarity, feedback. Some of the bad bits were, yeah, pressure, uninspiring, under-resourced types of things that are there. So we're getting flips, right, of people who are either, yeah, or no autonomy, no control, like this list of different things that are coming up. Now, bear with me, I'm going to kind of unpack this. I just wanted you to, even if you're not answering on Slido, just think about this. And then I'm going to get you to move to the next slide, which is to think about, and some of you actually did put a couple of things in there already, like stress and burnout, but if you think about that worst job or that best job, if you think about what impact did it have on you, the team, or the organisation, and you just think about how it made you feel, if you want to answer to this one. So some of the bad things possibly, you know, yeah, so low motivation, that's theirs, coming up really big, undermined, worthless. For some on the opposite side, you know, it's obviously motivated, trying to look at, yeah, whereas, and high performing and engaged for some of them, whereas, yeah, some of these other ones, purposeless, lost sleep, procrastination, quitting. We're seeing this whole range of things that are happening, right? Yep. So hold those thoughts for a moment and I'll get you to move to the next slide, which then, it's back over to me. Cool. So up on the slide, there's lots of little mini things that are written there, that some of which would be the good or the good side, if you've written negative things, you know, or the flip side, depending on which was positive or negative, of aspects of your work that you might have talked about, right? So we're talking about things like task variety, control over timing of work, role clarity, all of these things. And I think that one of the issues with when you're trying to deal with what is it about work and how do you design work and what's that importance of work for mental health and well-being, and then you look at all the psychosocial risks that sit there, they can look like this massive shopping list, right, of different things, and which of the things do you focus on. And a big part of one of the things that we wanted to do around Thrive was to really cluster these things together. So actually, how people feel around aspects of their work and then the impact of these aspects of the work actually kind of cluster quite nicely. And I feel like at this level, you've talked a little bit about SMART before, you know, what you have is actually, for example, you've talked about some of these stimulating work, so task variety, skill use, significance, job complexity. People also have this want to master their role, so if you feel like you didn't have the role clarity, you weren't getting feedback, you didn't know your purpose around things, or you felt like you did. You know, the agency, so control over the when, where, how you do your work as appropriate. There is a relational aspect, so the social contact, can you see sort of where the end user is, and do you have access to peer support and supervisor support? And then these tolerable demands that are here, so workload, emotional pressures, work hours, and varying things that are here. Now, this is what we mean by smart work design, is we mean that you have stimulating mastery, agency, relational and tolerable demands within your work. And really what work design is this sort of just structuring of the content and organisation of tasks and activities and responsibilities within a role is what I mean. Let me unpack this further and actually say that when we're talking about smart work design, we're talking about the fact that they're there as the psychosocial risks that are legislated for a reason, and they're there because they have been consistently, if you do not have these aspects of work, can cause mental strain and ill health. So there's the mental health outcomes. But many of you actually mentioned in your examples more motivation and performance type of outcomes that were there as well. And then sort of potentially there's also, you know, learning and growth, or there was some, I think there were a couple of examples there of like kind of wasted talent that was there as well. So there are so many studies that sit around this, but really what I'm talking about here is actually that work design we're talking kind of about when we talk about mental health, we're not just talking about mental ill health, we're actually talking about that whole spectrum, and you can leverage Thrive across that spectrum. Now, not going to go into a huge amount of detail around this, but I'm actually wanting to say that what we're really focusing on here is this prevent harms section, and this is where SMART sits within the Thrive framework that's here today. And I just wanted to you're welcome to copy of the slides afterwards that are here, but what I wanted to also say is some of you here might have within your responsibilities, portfolios, this sort of psychosocial risk management space that's here, and or understanding. And when we're talking about prevent, the bottom here is pretty much the psychosocial risk side, but if you flip it, so you're talking about, you know, low challenge, low variety as a psychosocial risk, but the opposite would be skill usage, skill variety side of things. So it's just one is a avoidance kind of approach, and one is an approach goal as well. And actually, if you put it as a good work design and you take it as an approach, you actually get a lot of more positive benefits of supporting people's mental health and well-being. So people do not feel like you just making them not broken is a particularly motivating or inspiring thing. And another thing around this, which I'm going to talk more about in a moment, is kind of separating out in that model of the tolerable demands versus the supporting the resources. I'm going to work through in a bit. So what does smart work design look like? Well, just unpacking this a little bit further around what we mean by this is Work in which you have variety, interest and challenge, right? There's a sense of meaning or significance in your work, and you can use and develop skills and career progress. As I walk through these things, I guess it's worth thinking about what you have, what programs you have, how it sits within these opportunities of all the things you already have within your organisations that may often not have been thought of as wellbeing initiatives, but are actually there as potential wellbeing initiatives, and that's a really important part of this. Now, if you have an absence of these stimulating aspects of work, you can often have this bored, disengaged, sense of going nowhere, feeling of coasting kind of side of things, which is getting there to before some of the other musculoskeletal and varying other things that might end up in the injury sort of space. When it comes to mastery, we're talking about people being clear about their roles, responsibilities, and what good performance looks like, and sure how your work contributes or fits to this, and clear around how you're performing, right? So there will be many aspects of the roles in which you support or are engaged in which have a lot of mechanisms and ways in which to do this. And so, you know, feelings of a lack of mastery might be anxiousness, low self-efficacy, the feelings of stress because you're not able to do your work or your workload, or unseen, unrecognised, you know, aspects. From an agency perspective, we're talking about this feeling of control over methods and timing of your work, opportunity to use your initiative and consulted, and a sense of being heard around local decisions. I used the submarine example of some of the work we do, and I might just say, because I think it's of relevance here, when we study submariners and we look at what aspects are sort of relating to their varying mental health and wellbeing outcomes, what matters depends on their context too, right? So it actually matters whether they're on mission or whether they are what we call alongside or shore-based roles. So they don't need a sense of agency as such when they're on mission. It's a hierarchy, people are doing what they need to do. It's actually when they are shore-based or sort of back in the office type of roles where those sorts of things play out as agency. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many opportunities around consultation and engagement and control that are perfectly appropriate in a military, paramilitary and emergency kind of services setting as well. And otherwise you can have these feelings of it's not my job, disempowered, micromanaged, frustrated, talent unused kind of things that many of you sort of mentioned in those feelings around your work. The relational aspect, so it's this sort of feeling that you've got a positive team vibe, the psych safety, you feel like you've got a supportive boss or colleague, so obviously the opposite is the opposite of these things. A sense of being part of something bigger, and there's a sort of absence of toxicity or harassment that's there. Whereas otherwise there's this isolation, loneliness, disconnected, fearful, feeling you can't be yourself, siloed on your own. The tolerable demands are these sort of levels of the job demands, workload, time pressure, emotional demands that feel manageable. And here we say tolerable demands because you don't want no demands in your job. They're also, the stimulating part of your job, for example, and the mastery. And there's these feelings associated with demands that are not tolerable, would be pulled in different directions, overwhelmed, exhausted, family conflicts, not sleeping, never able to catch up, all of those sorts of things that are here. And if you bring all of those together, I guess what we're really talking about here though is that what you have is it's okay to have demands and it's okay to have particular stresses in your job, but what you're trying to do is balance those out from a prevention space. You're not necessarily trying to eliminate these things, you're trying to think about the balance that's here. And what we would think of is that the SMAR parts of the role are actually things you can increase. So if people are being underused or they have a lack of clarity or they're not feeling like they're engaged or consulted or they don't know how to get team support, you can improve those things. Whereas often we think of only the demands part, we think of vicarious trauma or we think of cognitive load or we think of these physical aspects that we need to remove from the environment, but actually a lack of stimulating mastery, agency and relational can feel like demands, but you can actually improve those. And so when you're thinking about these things, you can actually, you're not looking at, if you don't take it all as risks and you actually take them as what can we improve or what can we increase, I think you have a bucket of wellbeing initiatives and things that you can kind of capture within your plan that's much bigger than just, you know, and you can actually capture. So hopefully I'm making sense. So you can go these sort of strategies to increase these, and you can do these sort of strategies to reduce potentially demands that are intolerable. Comes with some caveats, and I'll talk about in a bit. But very quickly, what I would also like to do is talk about, and we talked about when I asked you sort of what were the good bits and or what were the things that caused these aspects of your job. If I ask you just again, you know, what factors shape our work design? And if I was to get you to answer, what are the things that you think factors influence your work design? I'm not sure if we said in the poll that you can do more than one response or not. I feel like, yep, you can. Type away. Budget, social aspects, strategy, workload, people, management support, culture, flexibility, buy-in. So we've got budget, funding, leaders, culture as the bigger ones at the moment. There's like clarity, expectations. Technology. I'm not reading out ones in case you're wondering why you're not getting picked. I'm just that they keep moving around and I'm just kind of thinking of new ones that I'm seeing. Yeah, org structure, management support. Let's unpack these now. So here's a list of some of the things that we would see as when we kind of study the antecedents of work design. We have, if I start with over the formal job description that's there, so actually how's your job actually designed, what's it meant to look at, and what are those decisions, which is actually what people often think of as what we mean by work design, but we mean all of these things. It could also be an individual or the team and how people are interacting. So it's individual behaviours and how they're shaping their role. Leader behaviours are important. It might be, and many of you mentioned, things like rigid structures or varying things, but HR policies and practices that are there. What are the rules and the guidelines? Technology, that's there. Organisational design and priorities and things. And then potentially at a higher level, it's also macro. So that would be big government funding models and those sorts of things in this space, right? So I hope I captured your stuff, right, that you put forward in those things. And so I'm just going to spend the last bit of time, because I could talk to you for a very long time around all of these things. I thought when I was going, what's a really condensed version of how I can give you kind of just some food for thought, I suppose, around this. And one of the things that, we call this the bingo card. Yeah, this is it. Like, I'm just going to walk through each one, like, slowly. No, it's not what's happening. It's not what's happening here. Kind of ignore that. I'm going to step you through this in a moment. But what's going to happen? So, we got SMART down here, right? And then all I've done is gone, your formal job, this individual and job crafting kind of space, leader behaviours, HR policies, tech, formal engagement, macro stuff across there, and then it's sort of things that happen within each of those which would impact on SMART. So for example, it would be like within your formal job, if we take stimulating, it might be, you know, do you have task variety, problem solving responsibilities, through to you could be proactive in your job, or an individual could go, I want more stuff, I want to do these things. A leader would need to maybe delegate encourage crafting, ask people for these things, so it's sort of empowering, through to do you have HR policies like job rotation or development opportunities, through to tech, do you have a heap of passive monitoring things or are there more active things that are here, right? Like, so hopefully it's making sense to you as well as we are. And then you might have, okay, but is there also the removal of excess bureaucracy that will enable people to engage in these things? And then there might be particular industry requirements or safety laws and varying things that require, you know, that kind of constrain you around which tasks and how you do things. So if you take that and then you think about this sort of one part, which is just your formal job, right? That's there. What I'm trying to say is there's so much more than that. And one of those other things would be, if we sort of go, many of you talked about also culture and team and relational aspects, it's sort of what's happening informally or collectively within your teams. That is both an individual kind of seeking opportunities, being open to things, you know, and that sorts of things that are there, as well as empowered leadership that are enabling and facilitating those sorts of things that are there, right? So you kind of got the mix of those two that are happening at that first level that's there. And I thought actually one interesting point to make here is we craft our jobs, we do it all the time. Every single one of us here, even if you had same job description as someone else, you do different things. You take on different responsibilities, different ways in which you kind of like shove something to the side or do more of something or engage differently around things, right? How we do that job crafting well and how we teach people to craft well is actually really important, because as I mentioned before, we often focus on reducing demands that are happening, and what that actually happens is that often it removes the good parts of our job too, because there are stimulating demands or challenge demands in our job, as well as we try to hindrance demands. And I think that there's this nice study that was done of police officers over a time of change, in which what happened was that those individuals during that time that actually tried to focus on increasing resources, so trying to actually go, I want more clarity, who do I connect with, what do I do, involvement in decision making, had this increase in task performance, increase in engagement and a decrease in exhaustion. Whereas, and this sort of holds across things, those individuals who just focused on reducing the hindrance demands actually have lower engagement and increased exhaustion. And it's kind of counter to things. So one of the things that we can do to actually support people around their well-being is to also make them realise that sometimes it's about seeking clarity, it's about connecting with the meaning and the purpose in their work, and it's not just around removing demands. I am not advocating for, I'm not standing here and going, all of these other intolerable aspects of work shouldn't be removed, but from that, like what an individual can do and that focus in that way, like this sort of increasing of resources crafting, I thought might be of interest to you all. And so if you think about this sort of question of how can you support your workforce to have smarter work design, you can both look after yourself by proactively crafting your own job around that smart. You can also think about yourself as an everyday enabler of the people who you directly lead or work with or within your team to help maximise how smart their work is. I'm going to talk through each of these other bits a bit in a moment. And then you're also a system sense maker a lot of the time. Why do we have those flexible policies? Why do we have these programs? Why do we have this? Oh, you're feeling like this, you can access these things that are here. You might have talked about some of your roles around those policies at more of an individual practices kind of level earlier, but there are also all of the other types of training, development opportunities and broader things, you know, that are there. And it might be that you're in a position of doing role design. But if I take that leader as an everyday enabler, you know, the type of things that I'm talking about here are the sort of things about, well, encourage people to craft their own role, own work, have and foster a learning mindset, creating meaningful improvement projects that people can be involved in, you know, providing a clear vision, checking in on role clarity, providing effective feedback, you know, that's not just like once a year. involving people in decision making, delegating effectively, really thinking about results-oriented things, promoting that sense of we, being there for people, helping people to understand their value, and then at the tolerable, creating manageable KPIs. Some of that is within or without, outside of your circle of control, I understand. Not maybe expecting constant availability, depending on your teams, and actually providing the SMAR, right, to help manage those demands. And then when we talk about, what we mean by the system sense maker, we're talking about as a leader or as within an advisory role or an expert role, you're actually looking at those HR policies, the tech, the formal org design, and any of those macro influences, and helping to make sense of those for people as to what that, looks like. And that means, often understanding that there's a system that influences our work, and it's not, often what might look like stress, or we're just going back to that cause of someone might be stressed or someone might be performing poorly. But is there fundamentally something in which they have role conflict or role ambiguity, or they're underutilised, they're not feeling like they can master their role, or those sorts of things, which are actually system things that need to be changed, whether formally or informally. And so lastly, it is really just this sort of access to thinking through what are those sorts of types of policies and practices that you have in that space. And I've made it with 2 minutes to spare around that. But I guess my key takeaways, I guess what I was trying to get across to you all is wellbeing is the whole spectrum, right? It's what you have, or in my opinion and with our lens, is the support of people who are experiencing ill health through to the prevention of harm, or the early detection through to the prevention of harm, and potentially for that lifelong learning and thriving and engagement in work and fulfilling people's full potential. There are individual level supports that you can provide, and there are system level supports in which to provide. And I would argue that taking that more of prevention from a smart approach rather than a reactive risk approach, and looking at work design as all of those layers and those systems that are there, there's a lot in there that I think are actually actionable and gatherable pieces of the puzzle. And I hope some of the things that I said in there are either confirming things or new ideas, or some things that will give you some food for thought. There's lots of websites and things that we have in that are there that you can explore further, and that's me, done. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Karina, for sharing those insights. I guess in my experience, employees want to know 3 things: what's expected of them, how they're going against those expectations, and what the future holds. And the framework which was presented really resonates with that, and I think that framework has a lot of good value just to have as a discussion piece, to sit down with staff and talk through all of those issues, instead of saving it for the annual formal performance review. If you do that type of stuff and engagement regularly, I think you can get further engagement and ownership of work. So thank you very much, very insightful.
You're very welcome. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon, all, as we skedaddle out. Unless someone wants to ask me anything, but I think we're moving on. Yes, we're moving on?
Yep, I think so. Yep, cool. Thanks again for your time today, really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so our final presentation today is on creative wellness for first responders, and we're privileged to have Detective Senior Constable Evan Jackson from the WA Police. So I'd like to welcome Evan to the stage. Evan's current serving police officer in Western Australia with 12 years experience on the front line of emergency first response and criminal investigations. Evan has first-hand experience of the trauma associated with work in that space, and it would be pretty significant. Evan's the founder and chairperson of the Creative Wellness for First Responders project, and also a passionate major crime investigator at Western Australian Police Homicide Squad. So I'd like to welcome Evan to the station.
G'day guys. Thanks so much for having me. As you know, I'm Evan Jackson. I've been a copper for 12 years. Currently at Homicide, and I say that because Homicide's a pretty high impact place to work, and just like being a fiery operational fire is a really high impact place to work. My previous work locations are Child Abuse Squad, Organised Crime Squad, Cannington Detectives, and started my career off at Collie Police Station in the southwest. Now, Collie Police Station, fantastic place, busy place to work. Haven't worked there since 2017, but for me, one of the most high impact jobs or incidents I ever attended was at Collie Police Station. And objectively, I've been to probably more high impact jobs since then. I've been to murders, I've been to deceased children, I've been to arsons and fatal car crashes, and I've worked at Child Abuse Squad, which is a pretty intense place to work at times. But this one was a suicide of a 18-year-old kid. I'd actually charged him previously, dealt with his whole family, knew them reasonably well, and I think it was 2012, halfway through the AFL Grand Final, we got a call and off we went, and walked down this driveway into the backyard of a house, and there was this 18-year-old kid laying in his mum's lap. That, as an image, stuck with me forever, as you could probably imagine. And 2022, I decided it was time to get it out of here and get it onto a page. I'd never really, done too much art or creativity. Up until then, I didn't mind it at school. That was probably the extent, probably like a lot of us in this room. But I decided to go down and buy a pack of pencils, a bit of paper, and rip it out here and put it on a page. And it was one of the most therapeutic things I've ever done. Getting it, like I keep coming back to this, getting it out of here and onto there was massive for me, personally. And there is a picture of it, actually. It's terrible, it's awful, you can barely see what it is. But that's not the point. The point was, removing some of the emotion out of here and putting it onto a page. And I thought, well, surely I can't be the only one that experiences that therapeutic effect from that. That's surely something that we all know about and that is available to every first responder. Turns out it's not necessarily. And I decided to make some phone calls and see about how to change that. So I met with the Chief Psychologist, WA Police Force, and worked with Soldiers and Sirens, who I'm sure we all know, and we started a pilot project. This pilot project was run under the auspice of Soldiers and Sirens, and it ran for about 12 months. I'll get into the pilot project shortly, but I just wanted to quickly scope everyone's experience with creative wellbeing or art. And I don't have a fancy Slido thing, but we all have arms, and I just want to check everyone's arms work. Can you raise your arm for me, everyone? Yep, so that's the equivalent of checking the link works. So, who practices art or creativity every day? Raise your hand. Right. So there's one person in the room. I don't know, I'm assuming people are watching online, right? So what if I said that the car that you drive to work, I'm assuming you chose the colour of it, you chose the style of it, right? Everyone here, all good-looking people, you've all done your hair today. That's a form of creativity. You didn't get up out of bed and fall into clothes you're wearing. You chose them. You selected them. Apart from you guys. But you get a sense of pride from wearing that thing. I don't get to wear mine anymore, but I loved it. I loved getting up and putting that thing on. And that is creativity. So if you do your hair, you choose your car, you decorate your house, You enjoy it when you get home. You see what's going on around you. You know, you choose the clothes that you wear in the morning, then you practice creativity every day. So, raise your hand if you practice one of those things. Yay! Congratulations, everybody. Well done. You'll practice creativity. And I say that because it's one of the biggest barriers that we get is, oh, I don't do creative stuff. I don't do art. I'm not interested in it. Well, it's actually something we all do. It's one of the oldest things in humanity. It's actually a defining characteristic of the human species. You know, for as long as humans have been humans, we've done art. And little do we know, you all do it every single day. So the decision we made was to do a creative wellness pilot project. We ran that last year. And we worked with Curtin University, Wabney, Pete and David to put together a evaluation study, is what we called it. And I'll get into that shortly as well. But I just wanted to address some of the problems that we, as first responders, experience. And I don't have a degree in anything. I'm just a busted up copper, but I do have 12 years experience of sort of experiencing some of these things. Burnout and exposure to trauma is one of the biggest ones. First responders are exposed to an extraordinary amount of physical risk. To combat that, you wear flame-proof uniform or flame-retardant uniforms. We have riot shields and guns and pepper spray, way cooler. We have tasers and we've got blue and red flashing lights on our cars. We wear fluoro. We do so many things to protect ourselves physically. But what do we do to protect ourselves psychologically? Where are our psychological riot shields? Where are our mental hooligan bars or Halligan bars? That's a very niche, fiery reference. Is our response to the extraordinary risk we face psychologically, is our response to that, to keeping well, equally extraordinary? Without making a comment on that, what our association, what we try and do through creative wellness, is to keep our people well. The agencies, first responder agencies, are usually pretty okay at putting the wheels back on once they fall off. Waypol will be there for you if the wheels fall off. What do we do to keep the wheels on? We all know, especially fireys in the room, it's important to keep physically fit. That's a big demand of the job. What do we do to keep ourselves mentally fit? What races are we running in our mind? That is where creative wellness comes into it. 20% of first responders, according to Beyond Blue, currently experience depression symptoms compared to the general public, 7%. 26% experience anxiety compared to the public, 10%. SafeWork made a submission to the Commonwealth Senate in the People Behind 000 report, which suggests that the serious mental health disorder claims per million hours worked in the general public was 0.4. So 0.4 claims per million hours worked. First responders, that is 4.6. So that is 1,100% more. On top of that, 71% of police are hesitant to report mental health related issues. And 51% of first responders have experienced trauma which deeply troubles them right now. 50%. So what we find is the people that are most likely to suffer injuries, that are most likely to see trauma, are the people that are more likely or less likely to report it, less likely to talk about it. There is a stigma in the first responder community. And this is despite these injuries these mental health issues are despite applicants being vetted psychologically and knowing what you're getting yourselves into to a degree. And still, these statistics are what they are. But and I think the SMART presentation touched on this really well, we can't stop experiencing the trauma that we experience. We're actually, I would say, very proud to do what we do as first responders. That part we can't change, but we can change how we keep ourselves well and how we react to it. So, after having my experience with creative wellness, we designed the pilot program to try and combat that, to try and share my experience with other people. And this is what we came up with. So in 2022, we conceptualised the idea of running a pilot project, and until April we networked and created a board and fundraised. In July to August, right through to December, we ran various different workshops. These workshops included painting, drawing, mixed media. We ran some woodworking programs. We had a 4-week art course every Sunday for 2 hours. These were mostly run out of Midland Arts Centre. We also ran some in the southwest in Mugger River, and it involved police, fire, ambulance, current military, former military, and some civilians of those first responder agencies as well. One group in particular we decided to include was a group of police staff that had experienced the loss of a 21-year-old colleague who got cancer and unfortunately died that same year. They also experience a lot of vicarious trauma. I won't get into what it is they do, but they experience a lot of vicarious trauma in, in relation to what first responders see. And we wanted to see how group participation would benefit them. So we included them in the group as well. We had a heap of community involvement, networking, donors, things like that, and Curtin University, we commissioned a report through them. The pilot is easily probably the best thing I've just about ever done, as we'll hear from a participant shortly, Maxi. Now, this is actually pretty intense. I didn't expect it to be as hectic as it is. So Maxi's since been medically retired from PTSD, but he, as you'll hear, really benefited from the project. But I just wanted to quickly say he does get into some pretty personal details, and he's happy for this to be played. I just wanted to say that, it's about to get, you'll see.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Max Deans, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts regarding the Creative Wellness Pilot Project. My work history is 16 years as an operational police officer with WA Police in a variety of business units, including general duties throughout Metropolitan and Regional Western Australia, Gang Crime Squad and K9 Section as a general purpose handler. I've been exposed to multiple critical incidents throughout my career in a variety of different ways, and in 2022 I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression and anxiety. I am a father of 2 young daughters, and regrettably my marriage has broken down as a result of my diagnosis and health issues. I have engaged and continue to do so in a variety of different treatment options, including regular talk therapy with my psychologist, an intensive trauma recovery program last year, as well as 2 hospital admissions in relation to serious depression, trauma-related issues and suicide ideation. My experience of the Creative Wellness Project was overwhelmingly positive. During that time, I had been formally diagnosed, however, I wasn't talking to other police about that diagnosis. Quite arrogantly, I thought that I was the first police officer in WA or perhaps even Australia to have been diagnosed, and I now realise that that is absolutely not the case. I was initially quite nervous attending the program. I did not want to or intend to discuss my diagnosis with anyone at the program. However, I was very quickly put at ease. Evan was absolutely brilliant, making us feel welcome, as well as the volunteers who gave up their time to assist us with the woodworking portion or aspects of the program. During the first session of the 2, I spoke with another police officer that I have known for a few years. However, we didn't know each other very well at all, mainly in passing, attending a few jobs together. I spoke to him and he asked me how I was doing, and I just thought to myself, well, I think I have to, talk about this. And so I did. So I told him what I was experiencing, what I had been diagnosed with, and some of the struggles that I'd been having. And as I told him, I watched his face change completely, and then he opened up to me, and basically he was in need of some real assistance. And so I discussed with him. We went off and had a brief conversation separate to the group about some of the resources that are out there, some of the clinics and the programs, and as a result he has now finished a trauma recovery program himself, and I believe it would have been potentially much more serious if we hadn't had the engagement at that program. Aside from that, which is obviously a very positive experience, although difficult, the woodworking itself was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed making something and actually producing something at the end of that. Certainly still has a lot of value to me. I'm very glad that I was able to participate in that and do something that was removed from police work. There is obviously a time and a place for specific therapy, of which obviously I still engage in. However, the time that I spent on the woodworking program was very relaxing. I believe that it allowed me a few hours on a Sunday to decompress, and I wasn't recounting stories from work and listening to stories from work. It wasn't going through any of our jobs or any of the things that we've experienced. We were able to collaborate as a team, assist each other in different ways, even though we were building individual projects, and socialise in a way that's removed from policing. And it was very calming, I found. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's of immense value. I believe the implementation of a project or a program like this in a regular manner for any first responder agency would be of value. I think that one of my errors, I would say, over the last 16 years is that I didn't decompress enough from work and from all the different critical instances that I was involved in. I recognise the importance of that now, and I really believe that this program could go a long way in the prevention of trauma-related mental health issues for certainly police, but any first responder that's engaged in the type of work that we do. It's extremely important, and I can't speak highly enough of it.
Thank you, Maxie. So, to formalise the results and give it a little bit more credibility, the evaluation study was kindly completed by Curtin University researchers that are sitting at the back. I'll make this available to everyone in the room just to ensure that you've got the time to go through it. But very briefly, I mean, the stats are there for everyone to see. 94% felt like they benefited from it. Everyone just about felt less stressed afterwards. And 98% said that they see potential for the project to positively affect the lives of first responders, and nearly everyone supported the project being available to first responders following. So we did a study, a survey prior to attendance. We did a survey after attendance. We also got a couple of participants back for a focus group. The interesting takeaways of this was that they actually felt they really benefited from the exclusivity of being with other first responders. And I just know that first responders, when we see other first responders, it's just like, you're about to spin some yarns and get on, and, you're coming from that shared background, right? They also enjoyed that the wellness aspect wasn't actually overt, and it wasn't. I mean, they saw, an ad in like an internal newsletter type thing. They thought, well, I'd like to do some woodwork, and they came along to it. They did a survey before, a survey after. We facilitated the woodworking, and from that process, the wellness naturally flows. The wellbeing benefits of creative wellness, which I should note, or caveat, that is different to art therapy. Art therapy is a facilitated process with a therapist, a clinician, where you sit down usually as an individual or a small group. Creative wellness is more about the process, but the wellness benefits that come from it are massive. It is stimulating. It's a hobby. It's a skill. You can sit down, you can learn, you can commit to it. There's an interesting thing that happens to first responders, especially after we split from the agency, if we ever do. Identity diffusion. We see ourselves as first responders. We see ourselves as fireys, as police, as ambos. And we are really proud to be in that group. And so the things that happen at work, good or bad, we take home with us and can really permeate all of our lives. So sometimes it's really good, instead of just looking at ourselves as first responders, look at ourselves as footy players, marathon runners, guitarists, or in this case, a woodworker, or a person that likes to paint, a painter, or an artist. On top of that, socialisation is massive. You heard from Max, this whole thing has been worth it, if not for that one interaction. He was able to talk to one of his, a colleague or a person that also attended the course, raise him up, who went and experienced his own recovery journey. Now, it's not a standalone, cure-all for PTSD and depression in first responders. This is a complementary program. It's a wellbeing program, and it can easily work for people that are not well, people that are borderline, and people that just want to maintain wellness. And they can all participate in the exact same program and not know where each other lay on that scale. The decompression benefits are absolutely enormous. When you sit down to paint something or draw something or smash away at a piece of wood, everything else just disappears. You silence the sound that is going on. And it doesn't matter if that's work related or whatever's going on at home or whatever. It just gives you 2-3 hours that you know in that week you're going to be able to think of nothing else but what you're doing in front of you. You're standing shoulder to shoulder instead of face on with someone, which is probably, in my experience, the easiest way to actually talk to someone is when you're both doing something. Doesn't matter what it is, painting, drawing, tapestry, woodwork. It gives you a sense of belonging. You know, that whole Act, Belong, Commit, we're actually a partner with Act, Belong, Commit as well. Oh, belonging is on there twice. Good job, Ev. Well done. Lots of belonging. And, you know, stress, relaxation is massive. It is a relaxing activity, you know, and all you have to do is do it once and you'll see what I mean. And it's really hard to actually stand up and say, yeah, painting's really relaxing. If you've never painted, you're super stressed, you're going in, you're going, oh my God, it's going to look like, you know, stick figures. It is the most relaxing thing, you know, I do regularly anyway. And resilience, it builds resilience. It lets you know that you can make mistakes. You can do things that you know, you're not necessarily good at or you don't know much about. As first responders, we're thrown into situations every single day where people look at you for the answers and they go, oh my God, what do we do here? And you have to go, bang, this is what you do. Because if you don't do that, there's no one else you get to call to come and do it for you. So there's a lot of pressure put on first responders to know the answers immediately, and sometimes it's really nice to throw you into something where you don't know the answers, and that is building resilience. These are some of the testimonials. You'll have these in the report that you will get. But, you know, the testimonial from Maxi is probably the best one you'll see. But they are absolutely profound. You know, after we did a Aboriginal art session, Sammy Wyborn, incredible Aboriginal artist from Broome, came down, and it was a really cool way to share some cultural awareness through an activity that we could all attend. It's a way of breaking down barriers and a step towards that reconciliation space as well. And straight afterwards, a paramedic went up to, I actually have no idea who it is, but the paramedic went up to Sammy with tears in her eyes. She said that was exactly what I needed, gave her a hug and walked out. And no idea what was going on, but, you know, it was incredibly profound, the benefits that we had to see. Now, what does the future look like for creative wellness first responders? Now, we've incorporated as an association, which isn't very exciting, but it means that we're allowed to have our own public liability insurance, and what we are doing, we're providing a service to first responder agencies and first responder organisations such as 410, Soldiers and Sirens, you know, list goes on. The organisation's structure is essentially a board and a crew of operators that are responsible for the provision of creative activities through the city, and then also ceramics and woodwork as its own sort of management role. We see the flow of service provision as this, with the link between creative wellness, and we will harness that on behalf of first responder agencies and ESOs or ex-serving organisations or emergency service support organisations. So essentially, we will put on about 12 to 14 workshops throughout the next financial year, July to June 23-24. We'll go to DFES, go to WAPOL, go to SJA, go to 410, SNS, and say, you know, these workshops are on. What would you like? How many do you want to go on? You know, do you want woodwork? Do you want art? Do you want painting? Do you want, you know, you have the opportunity to choose what you want when you want it. We'll put everything on for you, including catering, insurance, facilitators, venues, referral pathways. If people come along, they're experiencing some dramas and they want to reach out for help, will work with you as the parent organisation or the first responder agency to make sure that person reaches your door. In the future, we would love to run exhibitions. We would love to run a showcase. What exhibiting people's work does, and it's not for everyone, granted, you could never exhibit my work because it's terrible, is you have someone's negative background, you have someone's negative experience, like a trauma, like, you know, my experience. That person draws something, they put it on a paper, and then you turn it into a positive one through showing it to their friends or family member. It also could just be, make a chopping board and you throw it up and people look at it and go, wow, that's really cool, and you go, yes. And it engenders pride. And it also provides a fundraising opportunity. We would also love to have a permanent fixture. One really difficult thing for us is being able to have a set couple of weeks where we go, right guys, you know, you're going to come every Sunday for 3 hours. That's not going to happen with first responders because we work terrible rosters. Well, chaotic rosters. So way down the future, we would love a central location for first responders to be able to drop in and access wellness opportunities, be it yoga, Pilates, a gym, you know, painting, woodwork, and so on. Currently, we're working with with Men's Shed. We're going to start in Coburn, expand to Joondalup. Those are our first two locations where we'll be running some kind of drop-in program for first responders. We'll also be running, you know, introductory courses to woodworking. You could even come along with an old cabinet that you want to restore yourself. Lob up on the Saturday on the back of a ute, drop it off, and come down Sunday and spend all day putting it back together and refurbishing it. I mean, that sounds something like I would really want to do, and it just allows you a couple of hours for first responders to switch off the first responder brain and switch on the creativity brain, which studies have shown is incredibly beneficial, and we've shown incredibly beneficial. We are, you know, we would love help from each and every one of you or anyone that wants to help us. There are a few vacancies on our board. Everyone knows someone that's an artist or someone that can help. If you feel like you can help us, please let us know. Other than that, if you've got any questions.
Feel free to ask everyone questions. Feel free to sort of provide about 10 minutes so with a couple of questions for you. That's good.
Fire away. Obviously pretty detailed.
I was thinking over in New South Wales we've done some engagement with our workers' compensation provider to look at some wellness support initiatives for staff with PTSD. Have you guys had any thought about engaging with your workers' comp provider to do those things, see if they can fund?
We would absolutely love to. Initially, our sort of model is to, so we've run a pilot for the last 12 months. It was very successful. We're now looking to set up something a little bit more formal. Once we have that really solid structure and framework in place, we were able to approach people like, you know, Bethesda First Responders or, you know, Richard Mattengard, and you know, we were able to approach people like that and say, hey, look, this is a really solid operating model. Do you want to be involved? And at the moment, you know, we're looking to launch back into it from July. So 8th of July is our first workshop back on. So yeah, we went to them now. You know, it wouldn't be as effective as going to them in 6 months once we've got a really solid operating thing. So yeah.
Because measuring the tangible benefits of support, potential return to work, or mitigating, you know, the impact of trauma and getting to get back to normal, so to speak, is really a benefit that the program seems to provide potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I can see this as a really good way as well to help with attrition and help with attraction, you know, as well.
questions from the floor?
Evan, what are some of the challenges in actually promoting the idea at the beginning?
Huge challenges, and it was exactly why I flagged it with you. There was one person in the room that actively practices creativity. So first and foremost, creativity is really daunting. It's really daunting. Come and do a painting, and the first thing you go, oh, I'm not good. I'll be crap. Why? So breaking down that stigma is really important as well. We're like an 80% male workforce as well, and there's a stigma attached to art, for males especially. So trying to break that down, figure out strategies, how to attract males into, doing painting or drawing. There was absolutely no difficulty in attracting males in to do something a little bit more tactile, like woodwork. Woodwork was absolutely booked out like that. That was a difficulty in trying to promote it. Other than that, it's actually taken off really well. Very, very rarely do we have a chat with executive members or OSH division and they tell us no. There is talks in WAPOL of allowing us to provide these during work time. Imagine going to a critical incident. And then instead of just taking off for a few days like coppers get, well, let's meet up on Friday and for 4 hours, instead of going to the pub, let's sit down and spin some clay or make a chopping board to take home to our family. Turn a negative into a positive. Yeah, so it's been really good.
I think I've got two questions. Hi. So firstly, you mentioned you do the pre-assessment when they before they've started the class. Is that I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that. Whether that was like psychological kind of assessments, whether it was like life satisfaction, that sort of thing. And then my second question is, when someone presents as quite acutely unwell, do you think it would be beneficial for someone to be there kind of, aside from obvious referrals to A&E or for psychological support services, do you think it would be beneficial if someone were to come alongside, I guess, to deal with people if they did become acutely unwell?
Yep. So it was something that we gave a lot of thought to in the survey, in creating the survey. And the answer really feeds into both questions. So it's really important for us to know what lane we swim in and where our boundaries are with the Creative Wellness Program. And something that the chief psychologist really sort of made a note of as well. And that is that we are not clinical, we are not therapeutic. So from a risk management point of view, it's really important for us to make sure we have a backstop if anyone becomes unwell on the course, that we have something to refer them to. But having a clinician present doesn't send the right message that we want to send. And during the focus group, we actually found that people really enjoyed rocking up and just doing stuff, basically, without an overt mental health or psychological flavour. So, number one is we have to stay in our lane, and I would love for a chaplain to be able to be at every one. I think a chaplain's probably a good person, or a peer support officer. Anything more than that is starting to flirt in that therapy clinical space, and then you have to have, there's certain guidelines you have to hit with management of people's documents, and there's so much, we don't want to be in that lane. Yeah. So, and then we're just not going to have people rock up if they think they're going to go and get psychoanalyzed. So we did think about including a K10 or K6 or K5 or something. It's a psychological distress, very quick and simple. They could have taken 2 minutes to do it, right? But it actually would turn people off, I think, participating. So we wanted to ask questions about why are they participating, and leave it up to them to tell us. So that's sort of the two-pronged answer to that. Yeah.
Something's come in from Slido, a question about how do you see the programs being most effectively rolled out in regional WA?
So, regional WA is an interesting one. We will engage, or we have actually already tested it in Bunbury, so Sterling Arts Centre in Bunbury are well on board with us to run some ceramics classes down there. And we've run a resin course in Margaret River as well. So unfortunately, we probably don't have the manpower just yet to personally attend regional workshops, but we would need to vet quite vigorously the facilitators that would run those workshops on our behalf, which we have one definitely in Margaret River. And we would just need to find facilitators that fit the mould, that are aware of the cultural sensitivities that first responders have, so they don't themselves get PTSD from running a program, and make sure they're the right fit for us. And once we have that, we can run it anywhere. There's really, really golden opportunities up north. A lot of incredible artists up north in the regions, so it's just as easy as the metro, sometimes if not easier, because for whatever reason people see the need. There's a lot of volunteers in the country as well, and volunteers, I think this might have come up somewhere before, we have really good engagement with volunteers as well.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's a great overview. Thank you for having the initiative to have the foresight to create the program and the leadership to see it through as a pilot, and you must be very proud.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's a great initiative, and thank you for sharing that with us today. I'm sure we've all learned a lot from that. Everybody, thank you very much. Our time has come to a close. Just a couple of little bits and pieces before we end. Tomorrow you'll get an email from AFAC just asking for some feedback about the program and the course today, and see whether it met your needs and any opportunities for the future, etc. AFAC will also send you some information on this year's industry awards, and submissions are open until Friday, the 16th of June, if your organisation wishes to submit a nomination. Again, we'd like to thank Stewart and Heaton for the sponsorship of today. It's very much appreciated. Big thank you for the AFAC team for coordinating all the logistics and keeping us fed and accommodated and dry in the inclement Perth weather. Today has been recorded, so thank you to everybody who's participated online, and the session will be made available on the AFAC website over the next couple of days. On behalf of AFAC, I'd just like to thank everybody for presenters, preparation, for attendance, logistics, and everything that's contributed to a very informative and value-add day for us all. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks for hosting NWA. Take care and safe travels home. So thank you.